Chapter 1081. Looking at how Prince Ding was trying to get in her good books, the prince finally revealed a hint of a smile. "Do you know that you're like a pug right now?" Prince Ding's countenance changed, and at the next moment, he suddenly barked. "Woof, woof, woof. Woof, woof, woof." As Prince Ding crawled, he started barking like a dog. The prince laughed out loud. Good dog, good dog. Since you're so obedient, so what if I spare your life?" With the full support of the 3 mountains, 4 peaks, Feng Yuan, and Prince Ding, as well as the prince's own abilities and means, the prince spent over half a month to gain control over the entire 6 regions in the south after establishing her prowess and expressing goodwill. These 6 regions were not only her influence, but they also provided her with the dragon chi that the Son of Heaven's sword manipulation art required. Standing on the southern shore of the Qing River, the prince's red robes fluttered loudly under the strong gales. It was as if she was a burning cloud of fire. She looked toward the sky in the north. Her eyes seemed to be able to pierce through void space, looking in the direction of the divine capital and munitions factories. Right now, we each have half in the north and the south. This can be considered fair. I only hope that you won't disappoint me after you come out from your seclusion. Very soon, news of the imperial court's great General Marie heading south alone to reclaim the 6 regions that were in chaos and proclaiming herself as the ruler spread throughout the world. The world was immediately shaken, and the imperial court was astonished. However, before the people of the world could digest this astonishing piece of news, even more astonishing news spread out. Marie had set up a battle with the emperor, Feng Xian, to be held 1 month later. The location would be above the Goddess Gorge in the middle section of the Qing River. Within a short period of time, the entire world was in an uproar because of this battle. Although the imperial court and Feng Xian had yet to give a clear reply, countless people were already beginning to look forward to this battle. Regardless of whether it was the imperial court or the rebel armies, both of them were facing each other from the north and the south. They had temporarily stopped fighting, as if waiting for the outcome of this great battle. The prince looked at the seething river under her feet and suddenly laughed out loud. She grabbed out with her hand, and a wine gourd was grabbed across space. Then, with a tremble of her hand, the royal wine in the wine gourd turned into a silver line and shot into her mouth. After drinking a few mouthfuls, she shook her head and said, "It's okay." Although the royal wine in his hand was the best wine that could be found in the entire 6 southern regions, it was still lacking to the prince who had once ruled over countless countries and enjoyed countless fine wines and delicacies. Feng Yuan immediately lowered her head and said, "Your Majesty, please forgive me. After I return, I'll immediately give the order to search for fine wine." "Forget it. This isn't a beauty that can be found with a simple search. Why waste people's money?" The prince drank the last mouthful of imperial wine and casually threw the wine gourd into the surging river. Feng Yuan said, "His Majesty is benevolent." "Benevolence? You hate me to death, don't you?" As if to enjoy the stimulation of alcohol, Prince adjusted his body, and 2 traces of red flashed across his fair cheeks. He smiled and said, "Not only do you hate me to death, but you also hope that Feng Xingjian can kill me, right? Your subject doesn't dare." Feng Yuan immediately dropped to her knees, wearing a terrified expression. The prince laughed and said, "I'm not someone who will casually punish someone based on their words. You're just thinking about it, and I won't kill you. However, if you hope that Feng Xingjian can kill me, there's a slight possibility." During this period of interaction, Feng Yuan knew that the Feng Xingjian whom Feng Yuan was referring to was Feng Xian. She immediately said, "Your Majesty's martial arts are top-notch and unparalleled in the world. How can people like Feng Xian be a match for you?" "Many people in the world think this way. Could it be that you think the same?" The prince turned to look at Feng Yuan and said, "Although I'm unwilling to admit it, Feng Xingjian's aptitude is above mine. If it wasn't because I've been cultivating for a longer period of time than him, I'd have lost long ago. However, it won't be that easy for him to defeat me." As he spoke, the prince had already pulled Feng Yuan into his embrace. This top-notch cultivator, who had reached the Great Tao realm and had the ability to change the world situation, was currently like a weak little bunny before the prince. She did not dare to move at all and merely close her eyes. Her face was flushed red, as if she was silently accepting her fate. At the next moment, the prince laughed out loud and loosened his grip, letting go of Feng Yuan. Feng Yuan rose into the air, and her red robes fluttered in the wind. It was as if she only wanted to fly out of the 9 heavens. Feng Xingjian, don't disappoint me. Just as the prince was preparing for his arranged battle with Feng Xingjian at the weapon factory outside the divine capital, over half of the weapon factory had been vaporized by the crimson blood mystic light fiend. However, after over half a month had passed, under the work of the densely packed mechanical cuttlefish, most of it had been rebuilt. Juqian stood in void space and looked at the weapon factory that was still being rebuilt. The prince's silhouette suddenly appeared in her mind. That person, a series of ripples appeared on her skin, and she was dressed in the same royal robe that the prince had been wearing back then. Looking at the clothes she was wearing, the young female android lowered her head. No one knew what she was thinking about. Logically speaking, the prince had entered the vicinity of the weapon factory. Based on Feng Xingjian's orders, she should treat him as an absolute enemy. However, for reasons unknown to Juqian herself, the prince's silhouette appeared in her mind, and a yearning rose in her heart. In the deepest part of the underground weapon factory, Feng Xingjian's martial arts cultivation had reached a critical juncture. The celestial eradication, sword technique, heart sword path, high-dimensional sword arts, and royal heavenly great art are the strongest martial arts I've learned. The ones that are slightly weaker are the void-shattering technique, 33 paradises, electromagnetic drive, and crimson blood mystic light fiend that I've learned in this world. Based on this world's consciousness, the comprehension of the heaven-blessed cultivators, and the Tiangang and Dishes system, I've created this 9 lives helix. 9 was the extreme of numbers, and 9 lives represented limitlessness. The helix was the path that led everything to an extreme, to the source, or to the source. The 9 lives helix that Feng Xingjian had created referred to this world's consciousness process of using the Tiangang and Dishes system, as well as the heaven-blessed cultivators to reincarnate and recuperate. However, he had also added his various understandings into it, forming a world-shaking martial art. High-dimensional sword arts are already the pinnacle of my current techniques. But if I wish to win against experts of the same level as me, I'll need greater power. Opposite Feng Xingjian, there were 3 Feng Xingjian who looked exactly the same as him sitting cross-legged. The only difference was that these 3 Feng Xingjian's bodies were flashing with different glows. One of them had 4 streams of sword light flashing to and fro behind him, seeming to form a sword ring that kept on spinning. Another person's body appeared intermittently, seeming to exist yet not exist at the same time. It gave off a blurry and illusory feeling. The last person exuded an astonishing imperial tyrannical aura. It was as if he was an emperor who ruled over the mortal world, and he also exuded waves of golden glow. Looking at the 3 people before him, Feng Xingjian sent out a single thought, and the 4 figures seemed to be wrapped up in a helix, becoming increasingly indistinct. Chapter 1082. The 9 lives helix that Feng Xingjian created imitated the structure of this world's will, the heaven-blessed cultivators, and the Tiangang and Dishes system. He separated each of his martial arts and formed a new clone. It was a little similar to the many heaven-blessed cultivators. Each martial art was a new martial life form. They existed at the same time and were connected to each other, yet they didn't interfere with each other. They were like the shadows of an object in different directions. This meant that he would usually appear as a martial life form, while the other martial life forms cultivated in the high-dimensional world. This was like the so-called projection. When the sun shone on the human body, the shadow that was produced would only reveal a portion of the truth. The shadow would never be able to reveal the true appearance of the original body. It was the same for the 9 lives helix. In reality, all of Feng Xingjian's martial life forms were stored in the high-dimensional sword realm to cultivate. What he revealed in the physical world were just his martial life forms, his projections. Although the projections were very similar to him, they were ultimately not his entire self. With that, after each martial art projection was killed, another martial art projection could be projected. The celestial eradication sword technique, heart sword path, royal heavenly great art, and high-dimensional sword arts. There were a total of 4 martial arts and 4 projections. It was only by dealing with all 4 projections that Feng Xingjian's interference with the physical world would he be able to truly stop until Feng Xingjian had accumulated sufficient power to carry out the next projection. The existence of the high-dimensional sword realm could be like many spiral drills, taking root in the higher dimensions of each world and connecting to the consciousness of the masses through dragon qi. Therefore, once he successfully cultivated the 9 lives helix, Feng Xingjian's actual body would be able to exist in the higher dimensions of this world through the connection of dragon qi and the group consciousness. Ordinary 3-dimensional contact would not be able to touch him. Once his projection was destroyed, he would temporarily lose the ability to interfere with the physical world. Once the connection with the dragon qi was severed, he would be able to retreat from the higher dimensions. The 9 Lives Helix was an extremely complicated martial art that encompassed the world, space-time, consciousness, dragon qi, dimensions, life, and many other systems. From the martial art projection to the high-dimensional sword realm, to the connection between dragon qi and group consciousness, to the world's consciousness and the depth of the world's origin, it could be said to be extensive, profound, and extremely profound. It was a martial technique that one would not be able to cultivate successfully even if they spent several hundred or thousands of years without heaven-defying aptitude. However, once the 9 Lives Helix was completed, Feng Xingjian could be said to have an almost indestructible life force. In fact, as long as the other party did not have the ability to interfere with higher dimensions, they would not be able to attack his actual body and cut off his connection with the world and the group consciousness. Meanwhile, he would be able to continuously absorb various energy sources and draconic qi in the world to recover and cultivate, using projections to interfere with the physical world of lower dimensions. In this state, it was as if he had become a part of the operating system of the entire world. This was also the reason why he created the 9 Lives Helix. Not only was it to raise his high-dimensional combat prowess, but it was also to get close to the origin of the world, the source of all life and consciousness. It was also to resist the curse of 5 years of lifespan. The spiral that Feng Xingjian had turned into flickered, appearing and disappearing, as if it was between illusion and reality. As the spiral spun faster and faster, its tip seemed to have rushed into an indescribable place. That was the source of countless consciousnesses, the place where all life in the world gathered. Feng Xingjian relied on the connection with a hint of draconic qi to enter this world's group consciousness. The so-called group consciousness was the place where the consciousnesses of all life with consciousness gathered. This place did not exist in a certain point in the physical world, but in a higher dimension of the world instead. The waves emitted by countless consciousnesses gathered together like the entire planet's magnetic field, jointly producing various effects on the world. To them, the entire world was just an extremely small point. Right now, Feng Xingjian was relying on the connection with the draconic qi in the royal heavenly great art to enter the group consciousness. In this world, this place was actually the core of the Tiangang dishes system. At this moment, the connection between the high-dimensional sword realm and the group consciousness was opened up, and the 9 Lives Helix completed its first step. 10 days later, Feng Xingjian sat cross-legged in the secret room located in the deepest part of the arsenal. For streams of sword light would occasionally fly and flash around him. Right now, the martial art projection that had appeared in the physical world was the celestial eradication sword technique's martial art projection. As for the other martial art projections, they were continuing to cultivate in the high-dimensional sword realm, silently engulfing the various energy sources and draconic qi in this world. The 9 Lives Helix has already taken root in this world's group consciousness. As long as the connection with the draconic qi isn't severed, I'll be able to project myself into this world. Moreover, each and every one of my actions will be reinforced by the group consciousness. It's like I'm a different kind of heaven-blessed cultivator. With the royal heavenly great art, high-dimensional sword arts, and his research into this world, Feng Xingjian finally relied on the Nine Lives Helix to enter deep into this world's group consciousness. However, this world was different from ordinary natural worlds after all. Other than the group consciousness, it also possessed its own world consciousness, that giant's consciousness. Even this world's group consciousness had been modified by the giant a long time ago, forming the Tiangang Dishes system. Is this feeling what it means to be blessed by the heavens? Feng Xingjian slowly tried to figure out what he was feeling right now. The feeling of controlling the hearts of the people in the world and the future situation gushed into his heart. The lives in this world that have consciousness are still dominated by humans. Controlling the hearts of the people means that the Nine Lives Helix has taken root in this world's group consciousness, which is also the high-dimensional world. Other than the three dimensions of length, width, and height, each world also had many dimensions that were hard for humans to detect. These dimensions included time, space, and even those that humans were unable to understand. The expansion of the universe meant that the dimensions kept on increasing. As the variable of life increased, there was also the addition of the special higher dimension of group consciousness. Right now, Feng Xingjian was using the Nine Lives Helix technique to enter the depths of the group consciousness. The consciousnesses of countless lives flashed before his eyes. At this moment, Feng Xingjian could deeply sense that this ability to control the world, the hearts of the people, and guide the future was even more profound and unfathomable than the various destructive prowess of martial art projections in the material world. Pinching his fingers and sensing the power contained in the projection, Feng Xingjian estimated that the martial will of his celestial eradication sword technique's martial art projection was still around 8,500 points. It was no different from the past. This was also because the Nine Lives Helix was not a technique that directly increased one's strength. Instead, it was a method that changed the intrinsic quality of his life. Chapter 1083. However, just like the shadow that was encompassed by the sun, the martial art projection would forever only project a part of the actual body. Even if this celestial eradication sword technique martial art projection was destroyed, the other martial art projections would not suffer any damage at all. They could still project into the physical world with their martial will at 8,500 points. It was like how the sun had changed its angle and projected a different kind of shadow upon him. With this, although there was still no intrinsic change to the amount of his powers, there was a qualitative improvement in terms of his performance. This was the benefit of a change in the intrinsic nature of one's life. At this moment, Feng Xingjian discovered that his stats window had disappeared. At this moment, he had completely broken through the limitations of the night martial arts. The path that he had taken was a path that he had opened up himself. However, his lifespan still did not change at all. Is this the power of a demonic god? Even though I've completely broken away from my original life form, to think that I'm still restricted by this lifespan. However, although his lifespan was still restricted, as his life form went through a complete change, his cultivation speed, survivability, battle means, and his realm all went through a qualitative transformation. Right now, the entire world was in his eyes, and even the various changes in the future kept on flashing in his mind. The Nine Lives Helix's enhancement has strengthened the ability to interfere with group consciousness, and it has also improved the ability of martial art projections. The ability to interfere with group consciousness was one's domination, guidance, and influence over people's hearts. It also relied on high-dimensional abilities to carry out direct interference. The battle prowess of martial art projections was the ability to interfere with the physical world. It required an even stronger martial art clone or an increase in the abilities of the original martial art clone. However, the original martial art clones were basically all cultivating in the sword realm. What Feng Xingjian needed to do was to create new martial art clones that were even stronger. To Feng Xingjian, who had grasped so many martial arts, this was not something that was too difficult. Before the 9 Lives Helix, he had already conceptualized some new martial arts. It was just that the nurturing of each martial art clone required a tremendous amount of energy. Right now, it was still impossible for Feng Xingjian to mass-produce them. In the sword realm, all sorts of radiations, light energy, heat energy, geomagnetic energy, and other energy sources were drawn over and gathered together. Concurrently, seething dragon chi descended from the sky and landed in the gathered energy sources, gradually forming a blurry human figure. A new martial art projection started to be born. This martial technique can be called the Sattva sword technique. On the day of the battle, Qinghe, Goddess Gorge. At this moment, the Goddess Gorge, including the area within a radius of 10 miles, was filled with countless martial arts figures. It was unknown how many experts in the world were attracted by today's battle. Of course, because of Marie's battle record, most people were more optimistic about the South's victory. They even felt that Feng Xian might not participate. At the location of the decisive battle near the Goddess Gorge, the 2 valleys in the north and south had been occupied by the Imperial Army and the Southern Rebel Army. The sentry posts were filled with soldiers at the innate realm, and they forbade any unaffiliated people from the pugilistic world from approaching. On the clear river, there were battleships patrolling about, responsible for clearing the area on the river. "Have all the seals been completed?" Feng Yuan asked. The assistant on the side said, "We've already cleared the area. Except for some of the invited masters, the rest of the Jianghu people have been isolated 3 miles away." Feng Yuan nodded in satisfaction, her eyes staring at the beautiful red figure at the top of the gorge. She looked at the red long robe that was like a ball of flames fluttering in the wind, and a hint of complicated emotions flashed in her eyes. Prince sat at the edge of the gorge barefooted. Her fair and tender feet hung in midair, swaying occasionally. A layer of bewitching red flashed on her toes, revealing her small and exquisite ruby-like toes. She swayed her legs as she drank wine while looking at the gushing river water under her feet. It was as if she was not worried about the upcoming battle at all. On the opposite side of the Goddess Gorge, Wang and Zhao Yinglan stood together. Although they were equipped with the Universe Night system, they did not feel any sense of security when facing that fiery red figure. Even until today, they were still unable to contact Feng Xingjian. Anyone who got close to the factory would be attacked by Juqian. Time continued to pass, and from morning to sunset, Prince waited quietly on the Goddess Gorge. However, Feng Xingjian did not appear at all. The people who had been waiting quietly gradually started to make a ruckus. Many people started to suspect if Feng Xingjian was avoiding the battle. What's going on? Could it be that he's going to continue waiting like this? Could it be that Feng Xian is afraid? However, His Majesty's martial arts cultivation is extremely high. It's very normal that Feng Xian is afraid and doesn't dare to come. Faced with the various doubts from the rebel army on the south bank, the people from the imperial court on the north bank were unable to rebut them. There were even quite a number of people who suspected if their emperor did not dare to come. Just then, Prince suddenly stood up, looked at the sky, and laughed out loud. "Feng Xingjian, you're finally here." In the sky, a white figure walked down step by step. He was like a banished immortal that had descended to the mortal world, giving off an indescribable feeling of calmness. "Maria, it seems that you've made great progress in your seclusion this time around," Feng Xingjian said as he stepped on void space and looked down at Prince. Prince smiled faintly. "If you're still thinking of sealing me, I'd advise you not to think about it. Although I'm still unable to create a seal like yours, I won't be easily pulled into a low-dimensional world either." As he spoke, Prince's body suddenly exploded, turning into a mass of invisible golden light that extended out toward the entire sky. In the blink of an eye, he had turned into a huge golden man that was several hundred kilometers tall, and it was still growing. Prince had released her virtual image right from the start, and her virtual image was actually her own appearance. Feng Xingjian thought thoughtfully, this suits her character very well. In her understanding, there's nothing in the world that's stronger and more honorable than herself. Prince's series of changes had long since stunned the countless cultivators who were watching the battle. At the beginning, they could still see a blurry human figure above their heads. However, as Prince's body continued to enlarge, there was only a stretch of golden light that encompassed the entire sky. No one could see the prince's full appearance anymore. The scene in front of them completely destroyed the worldview of everyone present. To think that there's such a martial art in this world, Zhao Yinglan said in astonishment. How old is Marie now? However, the size of her figure did not affect Prince's sharp observation ability. Seething golden light descended from the sky, accompanied by Prince's voice. Fang Xingjian, aren't you going to release your virtual image? Virtual image? I've long since lost it. Oomph! With a cold snort, countless streams of golden light slashed onto Fang Xingjian's body, instantly slashing Fang Xingjian into dust. Chapter 1084. Prince's Son of Heaven sword manipulation art was a perfect integration of high-dimensional sword arts and the Royal Heavenly Great Art. Right now, not only did Prince possess the astonishing power of her martial will cultivated from the Royal Heavenly Great Art, but she also had the ability to attack across dimensions. At the same time, half of the dragon energy in the world was being used as a resource to strengthen her power. Under the continuous slashes of the golden light, it was an absolute clash between two powers. Faced with Prince's high-dimensional attacks, there was no possibility of dodging. Fang Xingjian turned into a myriad of light spots and completely evaporated. Despite having wiped out Fang Xingjian with a single move, Prince did not relax in the slightest. It was because she knew that no matter what, it would be impossible for Fang Xingjian to be wiped out by her with a single move. However, after a single move, Fang Xingjian disappeared without a trace. Even Prince's sudden inspiration could not detect his existence. How is this possible? Could he really be dead? Just as Prince was feeling puzzled, Fang Xingjian, who was in the high-dimensional space-time, had already changed her form slightly. Therefore, a second martial art projection appeared above the goddess gorge. Unlike the celestial eradication sword technique's martial art projection earlier, this martial art projection flashed with a hazy glow, making it hard for one to see it clearly even if they tried their best. It was like some kind of mirage. It was the Heart Sword Path's martial art projection. At the instant the Heart Sword Path appeared, powerful illusory arts were unleashed concurrently. Fang Xingjian disappeared without a trace before everyone's eyes, as if he had never appeared before. However, this top-notch illusory art that could deceive most Tier 6 divine-level experts was unable to deceive Prince, who had grasped high-dimensional sensory abilities. In Prince's eyes, the entire three-dimensional world was now connected into one. Any operation based on three-dimensional space-time would not be able to hide from her senses. It was the same even for the Heart Sword Path, which directly changed electromagnetic waves. With an explosive rumble, several thousand streams of sword cheese slashed down fiercely in the sky, instantly dismembering the Heart Sword Path martial art projection. Sensing that Fang Xingjian had once again disappeared from this world, the prince said coldly, "Fang Xingjian, what kind of game are you playing?" Fang Xingjian did not say anything. He simply turned his high-dimensional body again and projected the next projection into the three-dimensional material world. This time around, it was the Royal Heavenly Great Arts martial art projection. Almost as soon as Fang Xingjian appeared, the entire sky was filled with golden light. It was as if a golden carpet was floating beneath his feet, forming a sharp contrast with the golden virtual image that the prince had transformed into in the sky. The two golden lights, one above and one below, were equally domineering and noble, but they were also competing against each other, as if fire and water could not tolerate each other. Just as Fang Xingjian reappeared, a gigantic golden palm slapped towards him from afar. Using the Royal Heavenly Great Art before me, I'll also use the Royal Heavenly Great Art and the same thing to defeat you. The entire palm was almost the size of a city, and the uneven skin and veins on it were very clear. However, given its size, it was like many small mounds and ravines, making one feel astonished. With such a world-shaking palm slapping down, the entire regional prefecture was almost blown by the strong gales brought up by the huge palm. Large areas of trees were blown up into the sky. Faced with this palm attack from the prince, Feng Xingjian did not dodge and also slapped out fiercely. In that instant, the golden light on his body gathered to form a palm that was slightly smaller than the prince's. The two huge golden palms collided fiercely in midair. That world-shaking collision could be seen clearly even from several hundred leagues away. It was because both palms were too big. As the two gushes of power collided intensely, a series of gales were squeezed out from the palms, shooting out in all directions. The terrifying gales swept down, filling the sky with dust, sand, grass, and houses. Within a short period of time, many people had died under these gales. Just this exchange of palms that seemed to be probing each other created a terrifying gales that was hard to come by in 1,000 years. The damage caused was almost uncountable. Within the entire region, countless houses had collapsed, countless trees had been blown up into the sky, and countless farmlands had been destroyed. After this attack, the entire Goddess Gorge was unable to withstand the shock waves formed by the intense airflow and collapsed. Several 10 million tons of rocks and sand plunged into the Qing River's estuary, blocking up the entire river. The cultivators who were watching the battle in the surroundings were unable to withstand this gush of gales. Most of the Xiantian realm cultivators were sent flying, and only a small number of Disha realm and Tiangang realm cultivators were able to stay where they were, looking at the sky in great astonishment. If it was not because the average martial prowess in this world was sufficiently strong, the earlier exchange of attacks would have been sufficient to kill several 100,000 or even several million people. Feng Xingjian looked at the blocked river under his feet and put his hands together to form seals. A royal heavenly great palm imprint slapped out gently, shattering all the rocks that had blocked up the river. They turned into powder that scattered in the air, and the river became clear once again. With our current strength, if we were to continue fighting, we'll probably wipe out all the living creatures in this world. If that happens, this world will completely lose its civilization, and we won't be able to pass through the heavenly barrier to return. The prince said coldly, "What do you want? Why don't we change to another battlefield?" Feng Xingjian said with a faint smile. As he spoke, the golden light dissipated, and Feng Xingjian disappeared and reappeared. However, this time around, there were spatial gaps that kept on forming and disappearing around him. This was clearly a martial art projection that had shattered void space. You know how special this world is. Countless parallel worlds are in the vicinity. As long as we can connect to the world's consciousness, we'll be able to find them. As he spoke, Feng Xingjian put his palms together, and a pitch-black tunnel formed in his palms. It instantly expanded to the height of a person. "Come with me." Feng Xingjian turned and took a step, entering the tunnel and disappearing without a trace. "Do you think I'm afraid of you?" The prince let out a cold snort, and at the next moment, a myriad of golden light gushed out toward the black tunnel like waves of paint. The golden sky that could be seen across the entire land was like paint that had been washed away by water. It gradually faded and disappeared, and the entire sky returned to its original state. On the Goddess Gorge, which had turned into a stretch of shallow beach, over 1,000 spectating cultivators looked at the empty sky in silence. They were still astonished by the scene of the two of them exchanging blows earlier. Each of their actions was a scene of destruction. It was as if the entire world would not be able to withstand their ravaging. Although this battle had yet to come to an end, it was destined to become a legend, a myth, and be recorded in the annals of history. Feng Xingjian had once seen the giant's body that was formed from countless worlds. Even this martial arts world that he had come to was just one of the countless worlds within that giant's body. Each of these worlds was a planet of different sizes. Right now, Feng Xingjian had broken through void space and the world's consciousness is locked down. He had broken through void space and arrived in another world from one world. At the instant he stepped out of the tunnel, he sensed that the world in front of him was another new planet. Chapter 1085. On a vast and boundless land, there were huge wild beasts everywhere. It was as if they had come to the dinosaur era. Monsters that were several tens of meters long and weighed over 10 tons were everywhere on this planet. However, this scene did not last for too long. As an extremely surging and huge golden figure appeared, the entire primitive planet welcomed its doomsday. Fong, Xing, Jian. Violent sound waves exploded in the sky above the entire world, forming a windstorm that encompassed the entire planet. Within a short period of time, countless animals were killed from the tremors. At the next moment, the Son of Heaven's sword manipulation art was activated at full power. A huge golden finger descended from the sky, instantly landing on Fong Xingjian's head in a high-dimensional attack. It then clashed against the royal heavenly great palm imprint that Fong Xingjian had counterattacked with. Boom! The entire land was unable to withstand the unbridled attacks from these two experts. Right now, the two of them no longer had any reservations. When they attacked, they did not use any power to control their powers at all. The repercussions of their attacks immediately spread out. First, piercing golden light encompassed the sky within a range of several 10,000 lis. Countless wild beasts were blinded by this piercing light. Then endless air currents radiated out from the point where the two attacks collided. They were like the shock waves formed from the explosions of many nuclear missiles, plowing through the entire ground fiercely. Wherever they passed by, all the mountains, trees, animals, and rivers above the ground would be crushed, turning into dust that was blown into the sky. A great sandstorm that could last for several decades was formed, turning the entire land into a desert. However, this was not the most terrifying thing. It was that Fong Xingjian had smashed into a mountain range like a meteor. The entire mountain range instantly shattered, and several thousand strong gales with strong atmospheric pressure shot out in all directions at supersonic speed. They were like countless invisible flying swords that tore through all the matter they encountered along the way. After Fong Xingjian smashed through the entire mountain range, he continued tearing through the earth under the seething power, probing downward. The outermost layer of the entire planet was made up of lithospheres that ranged from several tens to several hundred kilometers. They formed the various terrains on Earth. Right now, the entire process was as if the crown princess had shattered a large half of the continent with a single tap of her finger. The entire continent's lithosphere had shattered, causing the continental shelf and terrain to become severely deformed. As the lithosphere shattered, the entire continent was split into over 10 continents. Countless mountains turned into plains, plains turned into hills, and hills turned into seas. The force that shattered the lithosphere directly hit the planet's asthenosphere. The asthenosphere, which was located between the lithosphere and the mantle, was at a temperature of 1,300 degrees Celsius and a pressure of 30,000 atmospheres all year round, making the metals and magma they're semi-viscous and moving slowly. With Fong Xingjian's collision, both the crown princess and his powers exploded explosively, causing a series of tempestuous waves to rise up in the asthenosphere. Moreover, the powers kept on being fed back to the lithosphere and land above them. The continental shelves were broken one by one, and the 12 broken continents flowed violently in the asthenosphere, directly causing another round of continental drift. With a single strike, hundreds of millions of living beings in the entire world died, and the environment was completely changed. However, Fong Xingjian had once again entered a space-time tunnel. The prince let out a furious bellow, and the golden light that filled the sky also broke through the lithosphere, entering the space-time tunnel of the asthenosphere. After that, 7 more primitive planets were passed by in the battle between the two of them. The two of them only exchanged blows once in each world, but the damage caused by each collision would destroy the entire planet's ecosphere and cause drastic changes in the continental shelf, lithosphere, and asthenosphere. If they stayed on a planet for too long, the entire planet would probably become a hellish planet with extremely high atmosphere pressure, no liquid water, and a surface temperature of hundreds or even thousands of degrees Celsius. In these 7 consecutive exchanges, the prince relied on his powerful strength to constantly suppress Fong Xingjian. However, there was not the slightest excitement or smile on her face. Fong Xingjian, how long are you going to run for? Use your full strength to fight me. Once again, they arrived in another world. The surging golden light enveloped the entire sky of the planet. I won't let you escape again. However, just as the prince was about to wipe out the entire planet, her countenance suddenly changed, and she stopped what she was doing. On a tall mountain, 2 streams of light, one red and one blue, flashed and collided. Each time they clashed, the sound would reverberate across a distance of 100 li, and streams of air currents would tear through the sky. Ha 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 ha. Harris, your thunderbolt punishment is getting more and more powerful. A burly man whose entire body was covered in crimson flames laughed out loud. Opposite him, an elderly man whose entire body was covered in electricity said coldly, Jero, your flaming light tribulation is already able to produce plasma flames, right? As expected of the person with the strongest destructive prowess on this planet. The two of them were clearly top-notch experts on this planet. After flattering each other for a while, they were about to exchange blows again. However, at the next moment, waves of golden light appeared and almost instantly encompassed the entire sky. Their countenances changed, and they looked toward the sky at the same time. What's going on? Is it an aurora? We're on Mount Raja. How can we possibly see an aurora? The elderly man whose entire body was covered in electricity frowned and said, Could it be that the sun has changed? Or is it cosmic rays? Simultaneously, the entire planet noticed this strange change. All the observatories and space agencies of various sizes were in a state of astonishment. Countless social networks and official media outlets were in an uproar. No one knew what was going on with the sudden change in the weather. The lives on these planets were the reason why the prince had stopped. Sensing the densely packed lives and various active energies on the entire planet, the prince broke into a cold smile. If I were to really kill all the living creatures on this planet, with so many heaven-blessed cultivators and intelligent life forms dying, I'd probably suffer the full-powered retaliation of the world's consciousness. Right? Is this your plan? The prince's high-dimensional senses instantly grasped Fong Xingjian's location, and waves of invisible powers descended. On the tall mountain, the man whose entire body was covered in crimson flames locked his gaze onto the sky. He looked at Fong Xingjian, who had suddenly appeared, and asked, Who is that? Our battle is a secret. This person is sneaking around. There's definitely something wrong with him. The elderly man who was covered in electricity frowned and dashed out toward Fong Xingjian. Capture him first. However, the prince said furiously, Damn it. Earlier, she had stopped her attacks once again because 2 natives had suddenly appeared next to Fong Xingjian. She had almost killed them as well. The 2 natives had auras that were similar to heaven-blessed cultivators. They were clearly heaven-blessed cultivators from this world. Fong Xingjian then started to fly slowly, not distancing himself from the natives. It was as if he was unwilling to let the prince attack at full power without holding back. Fong Xingjian, what on earth are you planning to do? The elderly man with electricity looked at Fong Xingjian, who was gradually turning into a small dot. However, he accelerated and let out a deep bellow. Be careful. He's trying to escape. Fong Xingjian, are you planning to use the natives from this world to avoid my attacks? The prince let out a furious bellow, and a terrifying power turned into a point the size of the tip of a needle, descending onto Fong Xingjian's body. Chapter 1086. The golden energy appeared on Fong Xingjian's body in the form of a high-dimensional attack. Then it instantly turned into a light pillar that pierced through the sky, drowning Fong Xingjian completely. In order to control the repercussions of the attack, Prince had spent a tremendous amount of energy and power to condense the destructive prowess of this attack, reducing its influence on the physical world and controlling the light pillar to a diameter of only 2 meters. Despite this, the destructive prowess it displayed was still terrifying. The golden light pillar rose up, piercing through several hundred kilometers of the atmospheric layer in the blink of an eye. Then it extended out toward the endless starry sky. Downward, it continued to vaporize and shatter the ground, instantly piercing through several hundred kilometers of lithosphere and striking into the iron and nickel layer underground. However, the repercussions of the attack appeared and ended in an instant. The old man with lightning bolts and the old man with flames stared at the light pillar that had suddenly appeared and disappeared with a flash. When they saw the bottomless hole under their feet, their eyes were filled with astonishment. They had never seen such an astonishing prowess and terrifying destructive prowess on this planet before. However, after Feng Xingjian's figure was engulfed by the golden light and disappeared, he soon appeared once again. This time, he had changed to another martial art projection. "Maria, you still haven't recognized this world?" Prince was stunned for a moment. This world, her marshal will quickly listen to the countless information in the entire world through high-dimensional senses. She could see many cities rising up from the ground at the ends of the world. She could hear the electromagnetic waves rippling to and fro in the atmosphere. She could hear the hints of electric signals in the submarine cables, the whispers between lovers, the complaints between mothers and daughters, and the conversations of teachers in class. Several 10,000 kilometers away, in a classroom in a school. "Teacher, why did the dinosaurs go extinct?" There have been many explanations and hypotheses for the dinosaurs' extinction. However, the most popular and most accepted one in the academic world is the asteroid impact theory. 70 million years ago, an asteroid collided with Earth, wiping out 80% of the living creatures on the entire planet. The collision event caused a tsunami that was several hundred meters tall across the entire planet and an intense earthquake with a magnitude of 10 or above. A large area of the Earth's crust was evaporated, causing countless fragments to fly into the sky, forming a meteor shower that enveloped the entire planet's atmosphere. The entire Earth became a huge furnace. Even the largest continent at that time collapsed because of this violent impact, and then the continent drifted away under the effect of mantle convection. The Earth's orbit has also changed, making the entire planet's environment more suitable for human survival. Countless information converged in Prince's mind, allowing her to react to the situation in front of her. This world was created by us. Was it my previous attack that caused the extinction of the dinosaurs in this world? Terrain changes? After saying this, the prince immediately began to deny it again. Impossible. There is a difference of tens of millions of years. How could it be the same world? "Maria, do you really know where you are now?" Feng Xingjian looked at the golden light that filled the sky and said, "The planet under our feet is one of the planets you destroyed earlier. It's its future. You're saying that you can traverse space-time? What kind of joke is that? How could you possibly do something like that?" The prince said furiously. Concurrently, streams of golden sword light filled the void space as the Son of Heaven's sword manipulation art was activated. They turned into streams of sword force that could slice through continents and stood on Feng Xingjian's body. However, when the sword light landed this time around, it disappeared the instant it came into contact with Feng Xingjian's body. It did not have any effect at all. "What on earth did you do?" The prince was extremely puzzled. "This is that planet's parallel world," Feng Xingjian said. "I'm unable to traverse the same world's past and future, but I can find its future world. This isn't a jump in the timeline, but a change in space. At the same time, it's also the framework that Giant created countless worlds. He includes many parallel worlds." The golden light in the sky kept on trembling and expanding, but the prince's voice did not appear again. However, Feng Xingjian continued to say, "Maria, even if we were to continue fighting, I'd be able to exhaust you to death after spending a few years. However, I believe that ending is something that neither you nor I wish for. Therefore, I specially found this world and unleashed the strongest move that I can derive to defeat you." "Strongest move?" the prince asked. "That's right. This sword attack is called the Sattva sword technique," Fang Xingjian said calmly. After saying this, he disappeared. In the prince's senses, Fang Xingjian had already disappeared completely. Just as the prince was feeling puzzled, she immediately sensed that something was amiss. To think that her powers, which encompassed the entire planet, were starting to dissipate at an unbelievable rate. No, it was not dissipating. Instead, it was an even more powerful and violent attack that was melting away her powers from an unbelievable angle. What's going on? Within a short few minutes, over half of the golden light in the sky above the entire planet had dissipated. The prince tried all sorts of methods to stop the situation, but there was no effect at all. The speed at which her powers dissipated got increasingly faster, and in the blink of an eye, the phantom image disappeared. She had already returned to her human form and appeared in midair. The prince looked at her hands in a daze and said in disbelief, "What did you do?" Fang Xingjian's voice rang out in the prince's mind. "My Sattva sword technique needs to enter deep into the entire world's collective consciousness and gather the thoughts of all living beings before it can be performed. Therefore, I left behind my will in this world 70 million years ago. Right now, the past and future are already connected together." "Sattva sword technique?" The prince said in a daze. "What kind of martial technique is this?" "Impossible. Even if you can borrow the powers of all the living beings on this planet, it's impossible for you to surpass me. I'll be able to kill them all with a single thought." Fang Xingjian said calmly, "Intelligent life forms are existences with the most variables in all the universes. When a universe gives birth to them, they become one of the foundations of the entire universe, becoming the most important factor in changing the future. Grasping all life forms means grasping the future. The probability of every single life form and thought controls 99% of the entire world's future. After my Sattva sword technique has confirmed the past and future worlds, it controls the powers of all the living beings in this entire timeline. I'm not borrowing the powers of the living beings on a single planet, but the powers of all the living beings in the entire timeline." Chapter 1087. At this moment, in this world's high-dimensional space, a crimson spiral had already entered the depths of the group consciousness, piercing out toward the source of all life. As they spoke, Fang Xingjian appeared before the prince and pulled the prince into his embrace. The prince struggled hard, but was restrained by an invisible force. She could only glare at Fang Xingjian and ask, "What are you trying to do?" As she spoke, a faint blush appeared on her fair face. "There's no meaning in your struggle. Every plank time in the timeline can give me a portion of the power of all the living beings in the world. The amount of power I can borrow every second is an astronomical figure, and this figure is still continuously increasing." Fang Xingjian looked at the prince and said, "To what extent it can grow to is a figure that even I'm unable to calculate." Right now, the prince sensed a majestic power that surpassed her sensory abilities and imagination, encompassing her entire body. Before this power, even her will seem to be trembling, like a mortal facing a falling sun. Faced with this terrifying power, she could not help but feel great respect and worship, and the blush on her face became even more obvious. The prince possessed powers that far surpassed those of the same age or experts of the same level as her. Due to her experiences, she also had a great sense of worship toward power. When Fang Xingjian displayed the Sattva sword technique's endless and bottomless powers, she was deeply captivated by this power. "Surrender, Maria," Fang Xingjian said. "Right now, as long as I'm willing to, defeating you will only take a single thought. Let go of me." The prince glared fiercely at Fang Xingjian. Fang Xingjian shook his head. "If you don't surrender, I'll have no choice but to kill you." The prince's face flushed up again, and she said coldly, "You're restraining my chest too tightly." Fang Xingjian was slightly stunned. He looked at his and the prince's positions and said, "Let's surrender." Prince's face became redder as she felt more and more powerful forces invading her body. She said impatiently, "I know. I lost this time. Let me go." Fang Xingjian looked at the prince with some doubt. Suddenly, a trace of understanding appeared in his eyes. He let go of the prince and said, "So it's you?" "Shut up." Flustered and exasperated, the prince interrupted him and said angrily, "Can this sattva sword technique of yours be used outside this world?" "Of course not." Fang Xingjian shook his head and said, "I borrowed the power of countless living beings in this timeline, and it can only be used in this world. However, with my current understanding of the world, I can return to this world at any time." In the high-dimensional space, the red helix was like a ship's anchor that was deeply embedded, helping Fang Xingjian to remember the location of this world. It was like a locator. Hearing this, the prince's eyes lit up. She wanted to say something, but she was a little hesitant. However, Fang Xingjian said, "All right, let's go back. You should have woken up after such a big commotion." Hearing that, the prince's countenance changed. "You're saying," at the next moment, the two of them disappeared without a trace amidst a series of shattered void space, leaving behind the man with flames and the old man with lightning who were staring at the sky with their eyes and mouths agape. When they returned to the Goddess Gorge, it was as if the entire river had not changed. It was as if time had still stopped at the moment they had left. However, when the prince's marshal will scan the land in Middle-earth, his countenance changed slightly. Over 2 years have passed. Different worlds circulate at different speeds, and the time that has passed is different as well. Fang Xingjian threw a glance at the land under his feet and then said to the prince, "Help the imperial court to take over the influences in the south. I'm going to set up the sattva sword technique in this world." The prince's gaze flickered slightly as he said, "Doesn't your sattva sword technique need to connect the past and future points in time? That's a temporary method and isn't stable. The cost of communicating between parallel worlds is too high," Fang Xingjian replied. "To be able to enter deep into the high-dimensional space-time and grasp the choices of all consciousness, truly controlling the past and future. This is the most stable and effective method." A short moment later, the prince's figure flashed, and he returned to a city in the south. Ever since Fang Xingjian and the prince had both disappeared in the battle, the north and the south had fought a few times. The north had super technological weapons, while the south had Fang Yuan, a great Dao realm expert. Without Fang Xingjian's orders, the young female android Jiuqian had been staying in the arsenal. Therefore, after a few battles where the victor could not be determined, the north and the south gradually reached a delicate balance. Under this situation, the night martial arts that Fang Xingjian had left behind gradually spread out, and the power of ether particles started to spread out across the entire Middle-earth. The prince sensed the changes in the entire Middle-earth and thought, "Is this Fang Xingjian's arrangement? He completed the mission to clear the trial while he was at it. Or could it be?" The prince arrived in a study. When Fang Yuan, who was behind the desk, saw the sudden appearance of the prince, she immediately went up and asked, "Sir." Without giving her any time to ask questions, the prince went straight to the point, "Make some arrangements and prepare to surrender to the imperial court." Hearing this, Fang Yuan's countenance changed and turned extremely pale. During this period of time, she and her father, Prince Ding, had done many things that were worthy of being executed. Surrendering was the last thing she was willing to do. By then, even being exiled might be the best ending for them. However, she did not dare to rebut the prince. During the period of time she had followed him, she had a deep understanding of how terrifying he was. She could only grit her teeth and say, "As you wish." On the other side, Fang Xingjian came up to Wang and the others and instructed, "After the victory, the other party will surrender. You guys will be in charge of receiving them." Ignoring his overjoyed subordinates, Fang Xingjian turned into a stream of white light and soared into the sky. Looking at the thick layer of clouds under his feet, Fang Xingjian asked, "How long are you planning to wait?" As Fang Xingjian said this, hints of ripples appeared in the space before him, seeming to form the appearance of a man. Although the other party's appearance could not be seen clearly, Fang Xingjian felt a sense of familiarity from the moment he appeared. That appearance was that of the giant he had seen before, The giant formed from countless worlds. How should I address you? God? God? Creator? Feng Xingjian said as he looked at the formless person before him. Someone from the country of delusions? That's not right. If you were there, you'd probably have been beaten to death a long time ago. A cold voice rang out in Feng Xingjian's mind. A clone? A clone? A counterpart? Or a descendant? The other party did not seem to mind Feng Xingjian's words and continued to make his own judgment. Chapter 1088. What are you talking about? Feng Xingjian looked at the other party. There seemed to be no fear, nervousness, or terror in his gaze. This also made the immaterial man feel strange. He met Feng Xingjian's gaze and said, "You're not afraid of me. Why should I be afraid of you?" Feng Xingjian said. The immaterial man smiled and did not say anything. He changed the topic and said, "You're Feng Xingjian, right? I'm very interested in your background. What's your relationship with Lianping?" "Who's Lianping?" Feng Xingjian frowned. This was not the first time he had heard of this name. Previously, when the evil god summoning ritual was held in the imperial capital, the evil god tribe's warrior had mistaken him for Lianping. In the end, he had used illusory arts to trick him out of the world. Lianping, huh? The immaterial man laughed and said slowly, "The silver demonic god among the 13 demonic gods, the god who rules over the country of delusions. His name is Lianping." Feng Xingjian frowned as if he had not expected this answer. The other party continued, "Actually, it's very normal when you think about it. As the highest existences in the entire multivariate universe, the demonic gods' powers radiate out to countless universes. Traces of their existence can be seen almost everywhere. Therefore, your appearance isn't a surprise. But it seems that you don't know what relationship you have with Lianping." The immaterial man looked at Feng Xingjian, and there seemed to be a hint of strangeness flashing in his eyes. Feng Xingjian said, "I don't know Lianping, and I don't know what relationship I have with him." He stared at the immaterial man and said, "Let's talk about proper matters. What's your objective for waking up and coming to see me?" The immaterial man stroked his chin. He was also a little unclear of the other party's background. With his powers, he would be able to cause millions and millions of stars to fall with just a single thought. Therefore, when he discovered that someone was making large-scale changes to the development and system of the world that formed up his body, he had awakened a small portion of his consciousness to see what was going on. The situation before him made him a little puzzled. He could smell the demonic god's scent from the other party. Just as he had said earlier, there were too many living creatures that were related to demonic gods in the multivariate universe. The more powerful ones were bloodlines, people of the same race, creations, existences, clones, and so on. The weaker ones might just be traces left behind by demonic gods, repercussions of thoughts, shadows created from a single thought, or even lives that have been contaminated by demonic gods' radiations. "You want this world?" Feng Xingjian nodded, not intending to hide anything. He had performed the 9 lives helix and entered deep into this world's high-dimensional space-time, grasping the timeline's past and future directions. Naturally, he wanted to control this entire planet. Hearing Feng Xingjian's reply, the immaterial man nodded. Feng about Feng Xingjian the Feng about. Feng's. The you, Feng hearing Feng. Xingjian Feng about. About. Feng. You. You're. As he spoke, Feng Xingjian sensed that the helix in the high-dimensional space-time had gradually stopped drilling down. Concurrently, various changes started to take place on the entire martial arts planet. Everyone's memories started to fade away. All the memories regarding Feng Xingjian became blurry, and the things that had happened in the past 3 years started to deviate in their minds. The so-called resurgence and the rebel armies gradually disappeared. It was as if the past 3 years were slowly being erased from their minds. Your martial art is called the 9 Lives Helix, right? It's not a bad train of thought to control the direction of the future through the choices of humans and the collective consciousness. The immaterial man smiled. But this entire world, this entire planet, and all the lives on this land originate from me. When they forget about your existence, how are you going to affect the world's future? Feng Xingjian sensed that the seething and endless dragon qi was disappearing rapidly. The Nine Lives Helix's influence on the collective consciousness had also been weakened to an extremely low level. The consciousness can affect matter through the physical body, and matter can similarly affect the consciousness through the physical body. As he spoke, Feng Xingjian's body slowly dissipated. He merged into the surrounding atmosphere, into the mountains and rivers, and into the pavilions. His martial will was like the spring breeze and drizzle, merging into the entire world. He was a hint of the night breeze that cut across the sky on a summer night. He was the droplets of water that accompanied the fishes in the river as they leaped out of the water surface. He was the stretch of rocks that had experienced the erosion of rain and cold wind for a myriad of years. He was even that flickering stream of time when matter was changing. Seeing that Feng Xingjian had disappeared, the immaterial man laughed out loud. "You want to fight? Don't regret it." In that instant, his figure seemed to disappear as well, leaping into every corner of this planet. At their current realm, the battle between them was no longer just a competition of moves, power, and abilities. Instead, it was a series of countless battles that had happened in the long river of time. Everyone's memories gradually disappeared within a few hours. They lost all their memories of the past 3 years after Feng Xingjian had descended into this world. This method was simple and crude, but it was very effective. It caused Feng Xingjian to lose his ability to interfere with the group consciousness, causing his Nine Lives Helix to be unable to take root in the depths of the world's consciousness. However, it was precisely because this method was too simple and crude that it left behind a large number of flaws. The memories were forgotten, but the physical traces left behind were still there. Moreover, in the next few months, they would have an extremely great influence on the entire world. In the night breeze, an official scratched his head, as if feeling that he had forgotten something important. At the next moment, as a light breeze blew, a page of a book was blown before him. "What is this? The army is quelling a rebellion? His Majesty and Marie are having a duel above the Goddess Gorge?" On the river, a fishing boat stopped beside the Goddess Gorge. It looked at the Goddess Gorge, which had undergone a great change in terrain, with its mouth agape. In the palace, Wang shook his head, feeling puzzled. He kept feeling that he had forgotten something. Just then, a book on the bookshelf dropped down. He grabbed it and took a look. It was a secret manual that he had written himself. Looking at the contents, his countenance changed drastically. During the few months, similar incidents of various sizes played out across the entire world. Countless experts suddenly realized that they had lost a portion of their memories from a relatively long period of time. As all sorts of information, traces, and remnants were discovered, the Crimson Helix once again entered deep into the group consciousness. "You've done well, but it's meaningless." In the night sky, a murmur seemed to be mixed in with the light breeze. Chapter 1089. Intense violence descended from the sky, and countless physical substances started to evaporate in void space. The man's powers gushed forth in the form of high-dimensional attacks, and countless traces of Feng Xingjian's existence in this world were wiped out. An official had just opened the door when he got a big shock. He stared at the empty study in front of him in a daze. Wang lowered his head and pondered for a moment. Then he turned to take a look and discovered that his secret booklet had unknowingly disappeared. In the study, the prince's brows twitched as he watched a tremendous amount of books, court bulletins, and letters dissipating into void space. The high-dimensional attack's powers were traceless and formless, and there were no lights, shadows, or waves to be seen. Right now, across the entire planet, the prince was probably the only one who could discover the changes. She, who possessed high-dimensional sensory abilities, was also the only one who still retained the memories of the past 3 years or so. In the starry sky, 2 streams of electromagnetic waves collided fiercely and then stacked together. Countless intents instantly converged together. Feng Xingjian said, "There's only destruction and no creation. It's because even you won't be able to edit all the facts within a short few days." Destruction was countless times simpler than creation. To destroy, one only needed to destroy the traces of Feng Xingjian's existence. However, if one wanted to create, one would have to weave countless lies and illusions in order to perfectly cover up the traces of his existence. The matter in the entire world was interconnected, and 10,000 illusions were needed to cover up a single illusion. If the man wanted to change the facts regarding Feng Xingjian in a letter, he would need to change all the people, locations, and events that were involved. As for destruction, all he had to do was to evaporate all the mediums that had records of Feng Xingjian. The immaterial man said, "Haha, although it's brutal, it's very effective, isn't it?" Feng Xingjian said, "It's brutal, but it might not necessarily be effective. It's like you're continuously using paint to cover a piece of drawing paper. In the end, it'll only get darker and darker." The duo's conversation was completed in an instant. After evaporating all of Feng Xingjian's records, the immaterial man once again started to wipe out everyone's memories. In the meantime, Feng Xingjian's counterattack continued. Countless people kept recording their experiences and the information that they had lost during the time when their bodies were vaporized and their memories were erased. What had a greater impact were the ether particles, martial arts, and high-tech equipment that Feng Xingjian had set up. The cultivation prowess of such night martial arts far surpassed that of the local Tian gang and Disha martial arts. Therefore, over the past 2 to 3 years, it had spread far and wide. High-tech equipment was coveted by countless people due to its ease of use and great power. Right now, while Feng Xingjian was resisting the immaterial man's wiping out, he was also relying on the influence of his status as the emperor to continuously create all sorts of major incidents. The night martial Dao created by the current emperor was spread to the world for free, and new models of high-tech equipment were released every 10 days. Armies were equipped with all kinds of high-tech equipment. In a short period of time, people had forgotten what had happened in the past 3 years. It was as if the imperial court had never been in chaos, nor had there been any rebellions, nor had there been any resurgence of the emperor. However, the current emperor was still an unprecedented great saint. It was because not only had he created the night martial Dao, but he was also the ancestor of countless cultivators in the world. The high-level weapons that he had invented and created were also the cornerstones of the country's rule, and they were divine weapons that countless people envied. Since that's the case, then I'll just wipe them out completely. In that instant, the entire Tianjing turned into ashes, and countless imperial court's armies were vaporized by invisible powers. The entire world seemed as if it was going to enter a state of tremors once again. At the peak of a tall mountain, streams of strong gales kept on clashing, seeming to contain a tremendous amount of sound waves. The immaterial man said, "Do you see that? My powers far surpass yours. No matter what changes you make, I'll be able to wipe them out instantly. You'll never be able to control this world." Feng Xingjian asked, "Is that so?" With the dynasty's destruction, the entire Middle-earth once again entered a state of chaos, and countless commoners were swept into the flames of war. Despite this, Feng Xian was still not forgotten. It was because the imperial court and technological equipment had been destroyed. However, the immaterial man did not kill, nor would he kill, all the humans in the world who cultivated ether particles martial arts. As martial arts continued to spread, Feng Xian's and Feng Xingjian's identities might be forgotten by others. However, the immaterial man would gain another identity as a martial ancestor, and he would be remembered by all the cultivators in the world. In the high-level space-time, the 9 lives helix seemed to have started to enter deep into the group consciousness again. The immaterial man's cold laughter rang out in the vacuum space outside the atmospheric layer. Is there any meaning to it? No matter how much you struggle, the absolute difference in our powers still exists. I can easily wipe out all of your little tricks. In that instant, Absolute powers once again encompassed the entire planet, and everyone's memories were wiped out to the time 10 years ago. However, traces of Feng Xingjian still remained in the circulation of the night martial Tao. As long as the people in this world were still alive and continued to cultivate this night martial Tao, they would eventually discover Feng Xingjian's existence. Many scenes of love and hatred, as well as family and country feuds, continued to play out under the interference of the two men. History continued to move forward in twists and turns. In the blink of an eye, the two men's battle had already gone on for 2 years. However, to them, it was as if everything had just happened. In the series of battles, the two of them used the world as their chessboard and all lives as their chess pieces. They kept on interfering with the present, changing the past, and guiding the entire world to go through changes. They kept on seizing control over all the living creatures in the world. At this moment, a hint of comprehension seemed to flash in Feng Xingjian's mind. Do demonic gods also feel this way? It's just that they don't control a single world, but countless worlds and endless space-time. Then how much of the demonic god's powers have interfered with my growth? It's just like how I've interfered with the experts in this world. The immaterial man's eyes pierced through the future as if he could see the future outcome. Unless his martial arts are wiped out completely, his spirit will eventually continue to spread. He could also continue to interfere and even create a martial arts ban in the secular world, completely wiping out all night martial arts. However, this would mean that he would have to change his Tiangang dishes system. Otherwise, this martial arts system that was specially used to treat his injuries would clearly not be able to compete with the night martial arts at the cultivation stage of mortals. Troublesome. Therefore, the immaterial man did not do this. He planned on wiping out all the humans in this world, and then sending people over from other parallel worlds. This was like rebooting the entire world, completely wiping out all traces of Feng Xingjian's existence. You want to wipe out everyone? Feng Xingjian's thoughts transmitted to and fro in void space. The immaterial man smiled and said, "Will you be able to stop me if I do this? Your powers have linked up countless worlds and space-time, and the resources that you've grasped are beyond my imagination." Feng Xingjian said calmly, "But if I were you, I wouldn't do that. It's because this world no longer belongs to you." Chapter 1090. Ha ha ha, what a joke. Doesn't belong to me? Could it be that it belongs to you? As the immaterial man laughed coldly, a terrifying power descended from the sky, about to vaporize all the living creatures with consciousness in the world. However, at this instant, the planet stopped rotating, and the vapors turned into solidified clouds. Thoughts came to a complete stop, and all matter in the world became still at this moment. When all matter stopped moving, from a human's point of view, it meant that the world had entered a state where time had stopped. Such a large-scale phenomenon of time stopping, it's impossible for this Feng Xingjian to be able to do this. The immaterial man was astonished by the abnormal phenomenon before him. At the next moment, he sensed that the entire world was breaking away from his control. As the world's consciousness, he was gradually being expelled from this world. How is this possible? Who's making a move? Who is it? In the high-dimensional space-time, countless white lights started to pierce through this planet's past and future. All powers that wanted to control this world were expelled. Why is it him? The immaterial man clearly had a great understanding of demonic god-level existences. Almost at the instant he sensed that the entire world had come to a standstill, he had already recognized the person who had made a move. However, it was also because he had recognized who it was that he did not put up any resistance. It was because he knew that it was meaningless. At the next moment, the world started to circulate once again. Other than Feng Xingjian and the immaterial man, no one else noticed this change. Simultaneously, the two of them also sensed that their interference with the world did not affect it. However, they were unable to truly control this world's future and its direction. It was because at the instant when the world had come to a standstill earlier, a certain power of a higher level had taken over this world. using a method that Fang Xingjian could not understand. It had completely controlled this world's future. He could still interfere with the world and affect the dimension of the group consciousness. However, the future of this world was no longer something that he could decide. At the instant he comprehended this, Fang Xingjian already had a guess in his heart. It's because this universe has been brought into an even vaster and more massive system in that instant earlier. It's no longer enough to determine its history by simply influencing this world. It was just like how the Yellow Emperor and Yin Emperor's tribes had spread out, like how the various countries in the Western region had established exchanges with Middle-earth, or like how the Great Voyage era had spread out across the entire world. When a world was included in a larger scope, the original power that affected the world was no longer a decisive power. Fang Xingjian once again released his martial art projection and landed on this planet. His feet stepped on the sea of clouds, and his consciousness entered the endless void space. It was as if he was sensing something. Concurrently, the immaterial man appeared before him once again and said coldly, "To think that you're actually White's lackey. White was the origin of formlessness and formlessness. Even amongst the 13 demonic gods, he was an existence with the highest status. Even the god of universal truth in Miracle World was just his clone. Just now, Fang Xingjian had also confirmed that the 9-tiered heavens also belonged to Bai's power. It was because he had made use of the dissemination of ether particles martial arts to complete the mission of the 9-tiered heavens and bring this world's future into White's control. In the end, as expected, it was White's power that stopped the immaterial man from making a move. This also showed that the 9-tiered heavens belonged to Fang Xingjian. In fact, Fang Xingjian could tell that the Holy Sea of Truth had the upper hand in Miracle World over the years. He guessed that in Miracle World, White grasped the majority of the authority and was the one who could decide the direction of the entire world's future. It was as if on a chessboard, the space in Miracle World was occupied by White. The immaterial man said slowly, "Good means really good means. I didn't expect that the fight between you and me was fake. So, you've secretly called over such a great god. It's true that I've tried to fight with you before. However, the amount of time you've spent cultivating and your foundation far surpass mine. Your powers are also above mine. When I realized that there's no way for me to snatch food from the tiger's mouth, I could only do this." Fang Xingjian said calmly, "What you should be worried about right now is that you'll lose all your capital because of the loss of this world." The immaterial man let out a cold laugh and said, "There's no need for you to worry. Back when I was fighting with you, I'd already made up my mind to give up on this world. I've sent this world out a long time ago, and it no longer belongs to me." Fang Xingjian's brows twitched slightly. He activated his high-dimensional sensory abilities and immediately sensed this. He could no longer see the giant figure that was formed from countless worlds. Clearly, this world had been thrown out a long time ago. The two of them exchanged a glance and instantly understood each other's plans. Fang Xingjian had not thought of being able to rely on his own powers to seize control of this world from the other party. Therefore, from the very beginning, his goal had been to lure White over. Through White, he wanted to take over this world and even the endless worlds that formed up the other party's body. This way, he would still have the chance to accumulate resources from these worlds in the future, turning them into endless resources for his own improvement. After the immaterial man sniffed out the scent that belonged to Li Anping and the silver demonic god from Fang Xingjian, he became extremely careful. He stripped this world out of his body and used a world to probe out Fang Xingjian's depth and background. "Lad, you're not bad. You're really not bad." The immaterial man stared at Fang Xingjian and said, "It's been a very long time since I've met such an interesting young man. It's also been a very long time since I've met such an interesting opponent," Fang Xingjian said. "I still don't know how I should address you." The immaterial man laughed coldly and said, You can't possibly be thinking that we can still be friends and turn from enemies into friends after you snatched away one of my worlds, right?" It was true that Fang Xingjian had this thought. The other party's strength was deep and unfathomable, and he knew about endless martial arts. He also had a detailed understanding of the multivariate universe and the 13 demonic gods. Fang Xingjian really wanted to dig out all sorts of information from the other party. However, it was clear that not every enemy would be able to forget all enmity with a smile after a battle. People like Tyrant, Urbian, and the Prince, people who were broad-minded, people who bullied the weak and feared the strong, or people who worshiped power, could become friends. However, it was impossible for people like the first prince and Alexander to become friends. The immaterial man seemed to be the same. Although the loss of a world did not seem to be much to his body that was formed from millions and millions of worlds, the other party clearly did not think so. Therefore, at the next moment, black cracks extended out from the immaterial man's body, instantly tearing Fang Xingjian's projection into dust. He then tapped out with a finger, and the spatial cracks extended out toward a stretch of nothingness, entering into the group consciousness of the high-dimensional space-time. His target was Fang Xingjian's high-dimensional sword realm. Since he had failed in seizing the world, he might as well kill Fang Xingjian completely. However, at the next moment, the other party had already disappeared without a trace like an illusion. He escaped. Chapter 1091. He escaped. The immaterial man was stunned for a moment before he laughed out loud at the next moment. Good lad. To think that he escaped before me? Did he borrow White's powers to return to his original world? At this moment, he suddenly felt a little regretful that he had only awakened this little bit of consciousness and power. If he had known that the other party was so crafty, he would have gone all out to make him stay the moment he appeared. But the immaterial man smiled coldly and said, Zhuqing Song should also be with White. I hope you'll like this gift. With that, the immaterial man pointed toward the sky, and an invisible wave instantly gushed out toward the unknown void space. Elsewhere, in the sky above Miracle World, 3 figures suddenly appeared. They were Fang Xingjian, Prince, and... Why is this woman here as well? You even brought her here? Prince looked at the young female android Zhu Qian and said with a frown, I put in a lot of effort on her. It's too much of a waste to leave her there. Fang Xingjian smiled and looked at Zhu Qian, stroking her head. Moreover, she hasn't unleashed her full potential yet. Zhu Qian still appeared to be in a daze and at a loss, as if she had not understood what had just happened. She was like a little kitten, sizing up this world curiously. In her eyes, Miracle World was far too different from the martial arts world. The hints of waves and void space contained a tremendous amount of information and energy. Those are ether particles, Fang Xingjian said with a smile, seeming to know what Zhu Qian was feeling puzzled about. Simultaneously, Zhu Qian immediately flipped through the information regarding ether particles that Fang Xingjian had stored in her mind in advance. Just as they passed through the 9-tiered heavens teleportation and returned to Miracle World, both Fang Xingjian and Prince also sensed the difference in themselves. This time around, after passing through the 9-tiered heavens, not only had their strength gone through a qualitative change over the few years they had spent in the martial arts world, but they had also broken through Tier 6 of the Divine level and reached Tier 7 of the Divine level after returning. Prince's gaze swept across Zhu Qian. It was as if he could see Zhu Qian continuously degenerating and transforming, turning from a complete android into many spare parts. Then there were all sorts of raw materials, ores, and plants. She seemed to be able to see Zhu Qian's past directly. The prince touched his eyes, and a hint of excitement flashed in his gaze. As expected, starting from Tier 7 of the Divine level, the path of space has come to an end. We can start interfering with time. Space-time, time and space were one. At this moment, when the prince sensed the changes in time, all sorts of mysterious understandings immediately surged into his mind. Tier 7 of the Divine level. The prince only felt that his high-dimensional perception seemed to be continuously increasing, and he saw his own past and future. In the next moment, her body's time was accelerated, and her energy consumption continued to multiply. The light in her surroundings also began to distort, as if she was being swallowed by a black hole. Tier 7 of the Divine level can accelerate time, Feng Xingjian said with a soft sigh as he looked at Prince's changes. When space changed to an extreme, it would bring about changes in time. From Tier 7 of the divine level onward, all sorts of illusory phenomena, negative energy states, and even superluminal phenomena would appear. Their battle prowess would be much stronger than those at Tier 6 of the divine level. To Feng Xingjian, the most direct observation was that his martial art projection had become stronger. Feng Xingjian swung his arm. As his body's time accelerated, his arm was now able to move at light speed. However, because it was only time acceleration, the kinetic energy contained in his palm did not change much. Although he had broken through the restraints of the night martial path, he was still able to control his martial art projection to receive the rewards from clearing the stages. However, just as the prince and Feng Xingjian were sensing the profoundness of Tier 7 of the divine level, an invisible wave seemed to cross space and chase after them, shooting toward Feng Xingjian's forehead. The prince's brows raised, and he activated the Son of Heaven's sword manipulation art. The time acceleration ability that he had just learned was also put to use, combining it perfectly with spatial translocation. With a single sword attack, sword cheese surpassed light speed. However, when the sword cheese collided with that wave, they pierced through it, unable to interfere with it at all. There's no need to worry. It's just a message. Feng Xingjian did not retaliate at all and simply allowed the wave to gush into his consciousness. In that instant, a tremendous amount of information was exposed before him. Even with Feng Xingjian's cultivation, he was stunned for a few minutes before he was able to receive all of it. Peroses? Hints of light flashed in Feng Xingjian's eyes as he read the contents of this message. This was clearly a message sent by that giant whose body was formed from countless worlds. It was also the immaterial man who had appeared at the end. This person's cultivation could be said to be unfathomable. He had even made use of this opportunity when Feng Xingjian had fought for nothing to find his way over and even sent out a message. My name is Peroses. I'm ranked first on the Astral River's Godly Demon list and the strongest warrior in the entire universe. The first sentence of the message was just this simple sentence. Although Feng Xingjian did not see the other party's true appearance, the domineering aura in his words still came gushing forth. That absolute power and confidence seemed to have been carved into each of the other party's cells and nerves. What followed was a large amount of theory, cultivation, and martial arts content. It was a description of a martial technique called the Divine Gate Reversal. The Divine Gate Reversal is an ultimate martial technique that I've created after roaming the multivariate universe and observing countless martial arts and cultivation techniques to counter Zhuo Qingsong's Divine Gate 4 transformations. It's also the fundamental theory behind the immeasurable body that I've created. This martial technique was called Peroses. It seemed to be a restraining martial technique that he had specially developed based on an enemy called Zhuo Qingsong's Divine Gate 4 transformations in order to deal with him. It was also what Zhuo Qingsong had relied on to create that giant's body. At this point, Feng Xingjian already felt puzzled. Why did Peroses impart this ultimate martial technique that he had created to him? Were there any loopholes or traps in it? Right now, Feng Xingjian was unable to make a judgment either. He planned on not cultivating the contents of the Divine Gate Reversal before he had completely researched it. After temporarily putting aside the matter of the Divine Gate Reversal, Feng Xingjian brought Jiuqian and the prince back to the imperial capital. Ever since the battle with the Quanji 7 people, the entire miracle world had entered a state of peace for the time being. The Empire and the Church each ruled over half of the world's influences in the South and North respectively. However, it was also because there were only 2 great influences left in the world that there were undercurrents surging beneath the peaceful surface. As the saying went, a mountain could not contain 2 tigers. When there were only 2 influences left in the world, all the members of the upper echelon realized that it was just a matter of time before a conflict broke out between them. Chapter 1092. Therefore, even though the world was still maintaining peace on the surface, Both the church and the empire were continuously investing resources to improve their armaments, preparing for the war that would come at any time. All of the knight academies continued to expand, and the number of slots for the selections increased every year. Even the regional selection and the national selection were changed to be held once a year. A large number of divine weapons were constantly being manufactured. Minerals, forging, transportation, and other related industries welcomed unprecedented glory. Right now, the empire had gathered the Sand Country, the Plains, and the original 8 regions. Regardless of whether it was in terms of wealth, resources, or population, they had all reached a flourishing state. The entire country was developing towards a flourishing age. If this were to continue for another 10 or 20 years, it would not be surprising for the country's power to catch up to the church. Of course, this was under the condition that Urbian was excluded. After returning to the palace with the prince and Jiuqian, Fang Xingjian first went to see the 4th prince to confirm the current situation of the empire. Hearing the 4th prince's report, Fang Xingjian nodded. "You guys have done well. There will indeed be a battle between us and the church sooner or later." Thinking of this, Fang Xingjian pointed out with a finger and sent the information of the various high technological weapons he had tried to create in the martial arts world into the 4th prince's mind. It takes too much time to nurture the knights. Next, the empire should focus its resources to mass-produce these mechanical weapons. After all, experts at the divine level, Tier 5, or even Tier 6 of the divine level would require extremely powerful talent. Even if Fang Xingjian was a genius who could mass-produce 9th-level mystical prints, if they did not have sufficient aptitude, it would still be hard for them to reach the pinnacle. Moreover, the wealth and resources spent on them would be sufficient to create technological weapons that far surpass their abilities. Therefore, Fang Xingjian's plan was to stop mass-producing knights with the country's resources. He would only select a small number of talented knights to be trained like geniuses. The saved resources were used to build large-scale mechanized troops to replace the lack of lower-level combat power. This way, they could create a military system with martial artists as the top combat power and the mechanized army as the bottom combat power. The mechanized troops were not afraid of hardship, exhaustion, and death. They were the best destructive force. Knights were nurtured through elite education, which made it easier for them to nurture top-notch experts. As for ordinary knights and second transition knights, the resources required to nurture them would far surpass that of a mechanized army. They would also need to be allocated authority and wealth. It was tiring and troublesome, and Fang Xingjian would give up on them. Of course, it was just not supported by the country's resources. Fang Xingjian would not stop the commoners from cultivating the knight martial arts on their own. Moreover, with many divine-level experts working as laborers, the process of building these high-tech equipment would not take up too much time. Therefore, in the following days, many secret munitions factories rose up in the empire. Prince Philip, Tyrant, Lan Yu, and the others each built a munitions factory, preparing to start producing a large number of mechanical soldiers. This included robots equipped with electromagnetic rifles, mechanical cuttlefish equipped with plasma cannons, unmanned aerial vehicles, and so on. Obviously, after the mechanized army was produced, the empire would have the absolute upper hand, at least in the lower levels of the war. However, the upper echelons of the empire understood that the biggest problem they had to face in order to defeat the church was ultimately Urbian. The second thing they had to consider was the attitude of White, the god of universal truth. Ever since he had spoken to the 4th prince, Fang Xingjian had been staying in the palace and looking into the distance every day, as if he was observing something. He was sensing the profoundness of the integration between Tier 7 of the divine level and his own cultivation. The ability to control time acceleration, when combined with his high-dimensional sword realm, gave him a special experience. Fang Xingjian, who had taken over half the world, had seething dragon cheese descend from void space, gushing into his body incessantly. The 9 Lives Helix continued to delve deeper into Miracle World's group consciousness, and he immediately sensed that it was much more difficult to delve deeper into this world as compared to the martial arts world from before. One reason was because this world had a longer history, and the other reason was because of the existence of ether particles, which greatly increased the level of chaos in the group consciousness. As he continued to delve deeper, Feng Xingjian's eyes pierced through the layers of void space. He seemed to see the choices of countless people and the future of the entire world. I see destruction and despair, doomsday and regret. Feng Xingjian's gaze flickered slightly, and he said with some surprise, "What on earth do you want to do?" Urbian walked out from void space. "You know what I want to do? Even if it's just this once, I want to win against him. Everyone thinks that there will definitely be a battle between the North and the South, and I'm your greatest opponent." Feng Xingjian sighed and said, "But who would have thought that you don't care about anyone in the world at all? The only enemy in your heart is him." Feng Xingjian raised his head and looked toward the stretch of nothingness in the sky. In fact, not long after he had returned to the Empire, Urbian had contacted him. Thereafter, he found out about Urbian's goal. To think that he wanted the entire miracle world to break free from White's control, break free from the control of the highest existence in the multivariate universe, and win against the demonic god once. However, the more one reached Feng Xingjian's current level of strength, the more he understood how difficult it was to win against the demonic god. At Bai's level, wherever his will went, it would affect countless worlds and radiate out to countless universes. For example, the current miracle world was almost definitely Bai's territory, and the history of the entire world was also under his influence. It was just like how Feng Xingjian's influence was on the martial arts world. Only things that were outside of Bai's would not be under his control, such as the 4th onslaught, the 5th onslaught, and the upcoming 7th onslaught. These onslaught came from outside of the worlds controlled by Bai, and they were the only ones that were not under his control. As for everything in the other worlds, they were all under Bai's control and operated according to his will. It could be said that Miracle World's current history, situation, the distribution of influences, and the cultures of the various countries were all created by Bai. Countless worlds were progressing according to the way he wanted them to. These were just the places where his will radiated, expanded his territory, sealed his opponents, and extracted their powers. In the depths of the starry sky, far away, where the demonic gods were fighting violently, there was also an unknown, terrifying, violent, and brilliant battle going on. All of history, the past, and the future have developed according to his will. Regardless of whether they are good or bad, they are all clearly beneficial to him. Feng Xingjian said, "Even our conversation right now is within his influence." Chapter 1093. You're wrong. Urbian smiled. When he engulfed my previous self, he had yet to completely control the universe I was in. Moreover, I'm not from Miracle World either. I'm an outsider. At the very least, at the moment when I was still an outsider, before I entered Miracle World, my thoughts of wanting to win against him were not influenced by him. Right now, I still hold on to this thought and have not changed. This obsession itself represents a portion of my will that has not been influenced. That's not all. It's not just me. Each time a divine-level expert heads to other worlds to clear the trials, it's clear that they are not under his influence as well. Urbian said, each time a divine-level expert clears the trials, they head to a world that he has no control over. Those worlds are clearly not under his influence, and that's also the moment when we have true freedom. The 9-tiered heavens is the capital that he uses to expand endlessly. The system that creates the ring of time to seal his opponent's time and time again also has a flaw. Even so, Feng Xingjian frowned and said, that's only possible if he doesn't really notice this place. However, if we were to take action now, we'll probably be discovered. Therefore, we need to make some preparations, Urbian said as he stared at Feng Xingjian. Let's clear the trials together and head to a parallel world. We'll make our plans and preparations there, and when we return, we'll carry them out immediately, not giving him any chance to react. Feng Xingjian thought This so-called instant will probably have to be calculated using Planck's time. It should be around 10 to the power of negative 43 seconds. You're right. Erbian's voice rang out in Feng Xingjian's mind. Let's do it together, Feng Xingjian. Do you wish to be under his control your entire life? As he spoke, Erbian smiled and put out his hand toward Feng Xingjian. Although his future was uncertain and there was a great disparity in their abilities, there was no hint of nervousness or terror in his smile. There was only endless confidence. Feng Xingjian did not say a word. Perhaps I've been under their control since I was born. Thinking that he still had about half a year left of his 5-year lifespan, Feng Xingjian eventually nodded and said, "All right, I'll take this gamble with you. I'll let this world completely escape the control of the Fiend Celestials." In Feng Xingjian's eyes, the two of them were like ants discussing how to kill a whale. But at the same time, he could see that both his and Erbian's eyes were serious. Compared to Erbian's obsession with justice and freedom, I just want to live. Feng Xingjian thought to himself, what a lowly and insignificant will, yet it is the common will of all living beings in the world. At this moment, the 9 Lives Helix seemed to have penetrated deeper into Miracle World's group consciousness. Feng Xingjian also gained an additional level of comprehension toward the yearning of all life. Since the two of them had come to an agreement, it also meant that the two strongest influences in the entire Miracle World had secretly joined forces. However, it was impossible for them to announce this news. After all, the battle prowess of the lower levels was meaningless to them. Announcing this news would instead cause chaos, and there might even be fools who would bring forward the war. After confirming their partnership, the two of them planned to team up with other companions. Right now, in Miracle World, there were very few people who could help Feng Xingjian and Erbian, and Prince was clearly one of them. However, it was clearly not that easy to persuade her to join forces with Feng Xingjian and the others to deal with the supreme existences in the multivariate universe. In the palace, Prince lay down on a deck chair in the garden, propping up his chin with one hand as he looked toward the young female android, Juqian. Seeing how Juqian was sizing up the flowers, butterflies, and various insects curiously, a hint of disdain flashed on her face, and she turned around. Prince's body was draped with a layer of chiffon, and her smooth and fair thighs could be faintly seen under the chiffon. As she turned around, her voluptuous bosom seemed to be on the verge of collapsing, as if it would break through the restrictions of the chiffon at any moment. She could not help but recall the power of Feng Xingjian's sword attack in her mind. Sattva, sword technique. Thinking of the unbelievably majestic power, layers of fine goosebumps seemed to appear on Prince's body, and her face once again revealed hints of redness. As a cultivator who had been oppressed since young and had always been working hard to go up against society's perception as a woman, Prince, who had faced countless injustices, discrimination, and even disdain, had yearned for power the most. What she had admired the most had always been power. Morals, influence, reputation, and background, all of these are meaningless. In this world, only power is the final indicator that decides everything. It was just like how some people like to eat desserts, some like to take risks, and some like to exercise. However, what Prince liked was power. Each time her power grew, and each time her martial arts improved, her cells would tremble from the bottom of her heart. She felt an extremely deep sense of joy. This was also the reason why she had been working hard on cultivating martial arts, and why her power had improved at an extremely fast rate. This time around, when Feng Xingjian displayed a sattva sword technique that completely surpassed her, causing her to be unable to put up any resistance at all, and when she was completely subdued by this irresistible power, out of the admiration she had for power in her heart, she experienced an unprecedented feeling. This feeling of being completely suppressed and being filled up by the power she admired the most was a brand new experience for Prince. Just as her face turned increasingly red and layers of fine perspiration appeared on her body, Feng Xingjian suddenly appeared before her. Like a thief who had been caught by the police, Prince sat up a little anxiously and said, "What's the matter? Why are you here?" Fang Xingjian threw her a strange glance. At Prince's realm, if she was not willing, it was impossible for her to blush or sweat. As expected, with Fang Xingjian's arrival, the abnormalities on Prince's body disappeared in that instant. In the blink of an eye, she once again turned into a cold and aloof ice beauty. If you have something to say, say it. If not, then scram. The divine levels checkpoints get increasingly difficult with each level. This time around, we managed to clear it without any mishaps. The next time we strive for Tier 8 of the divine level will clearly be even more difficult. Therefore, I've gotten the church's people to strive for Tier 8 of the divine level together, Fang Xingjian said. Do you want to participate? Oh, okay. The crown prince said absent-mindedly. Fang Xingjian was slightly stunned, as if not expecting that Prince would agree so easily. He nodded and said, all right, we'll probably set off in at most half a month's time. You should make some preparations, too. At the next moment, with a turn, Fang Xingjian disappeared into void space. Erbian asked puzzledly, you lied to her? In any case, as long as we head to the parallel world together, she won't have a chance to back out, Fang Xingjian said. If she really doesn't agree, we can join forces and kill her. Erbian narrowed his eyes and said, but is there no problem with Prince's strength? The changes to her body earlier are a little strange. It seems to have triggered physical phenomena along with the changes in her emotions. If she can't even control her own emotions, the impact on the plan will be too great. In terms of time control, we need to be accurate to the plank time. There's no problem, Fang Xingjian said. I can train her. Although her obedience isn't high, as long as she trains repeatedly, she'll still be able to reach the requirements. Chapter 1094. After temporarily deceiving the prince into boarding the ship, Fang Xingjian and Erbian headed off to look for the other target. The Silver Mage King? Fang Xingjian asked. Is he up to it? Erbian said, the Silver Demonic God strategy has always been to break through with a single point. Rather than wasting a tremendous amount of resources on an influence, he might as well create a top-notch character to bring about the trend of change in the entire world. Therefore, everyone who gets the Silver Demonic God's favor won't be too weak. It's the same for the Silver Mage King in this world. He has also reached Tier 6 of the divine level and can clear the trial together with me. We'll set off together after we attain a breakthrough to Tier 7 of the divine level. At the next moment, the two of them arrived in the sky above a tribe in the northern ice plains. This was where the Frostwolf tribe, the largest tribe of the northern barbarians, was located. However, right now, there were several hundred white-robed men and women surrounding the Frostwolf tribe. They were emitting dense demonic auras, White's aura. Clearly, these people were people who believed in the holy sea of truth. The reason why they were surrounding the Frostwolf tribe was that in the entire frozen northern lands, the Frostwolf tribe was the only tribe that had yet to acknowledge the church's ruling position. It was also the only tribe that had yet to convert their faith to the God of truth. Right now, the church's team was clearly here to force the Frostwolf tribe to submit. Looking at the two teams that were facing off against each other on the snow-covered land, Fang Xingjian said, is he supporting this tribe? It can't be considered supporting. Erbian said, you might not understand the situation in the desolate northern lands. Due to the harsh natural environment here, food is scarce and resources are lacking. Therefore, since ancient times, the various large tribes have been implementing the rule of survival of the fittest. The strong live and the weak die. Even siblings, parents, and children will be eliminated if they are not strong enough. Only the strongest warriors will be able to survive to the end. Ordinary morals and benevolence are not applicable here. For thousands upon thousands of years, slavery has been practiced here, and the members of the defeated tribes will all become the private possessions of the victors. Therefore, the lives of the people on this frozen land are extremely cruel. Apart from a small portion of the upper echelons, most people live in an abyss of suffering. Listening to Erbian's words, Fang Xingjian immediately remembered the philosophy of the Silver Army in the Ring world, and he somewhat understood. The Silver Mage King wants to change the situation here? Save those civilians? Erbian nodded. saving tragedy, that is his justice. As the two of them spoke, the two groups of people below had already started clashing. Both the church and the Frostwolf tribe clearly had divine-level experts among them. Both parties' martial wills clashed, causing large amounts of snowflakes and air explosions to explode on the snowy ground. A silver-haired youth from the Frostwolf tribe was leading the charge. Rays of silver light soared into the sky, and he alone blocked 99% of the power of the church's men. The three bishops in the lead took a step forward in unison, and resplendent white light burst out explosively, clashing fiercely against the silver-haired youth's martial will. This immediately caused the entire land to tremble. Before the world's metamorphosis, these three bishops had merely been demigod existences. However, ever since the world's metamorphosis, they had improved by leaps and bounds. Right now, they had reached tier 3 of the divine level. When the three of them attacked at the same time, there was a world-shattering momentum. However, despite this, they were no longer able to deal with the silver-haired young man. Just as both parties were about to start fighting, the entire battlefield was suddenly taken over by black and white colors. All martial wills, experts, air, and light beams fell into a standstill. Thomas stopped. Standing outside the black and white area, Feng Xingjian's brows twitched. His high-dimensional sensory abilities allowed him to understand the principles behind this phenomenon. It's some kind of material stagnation field that has stopped the movements of all atoms. Divine arts? Or martial arts? Simultaneously, a silver-haired, middle-aged man slowly appeared in void space, walking toward the Holy See of Truth's team. In that domain where time had stopped, everything was black and white. Only this silver-haired man's body remained alive, as if he was the only living thing in a stretch of dead silence. Strolling in the silent domain, each time he passed by a member of the church, they would instantly disappear into void space as if they had never appeared before. Feng Xingjian could sense that they had been sent to a certain place by the spatial translocation ability. Within a short moment, all the people from the church had disappeared without a trace, and material once again regained its movement. When the silver-haired young man saw this scene, he said, "Master." The members of the Frostwolf tribe behind him also immediately dropped to their knees. The silver-haired middle-aged man paid them no heed and ascended into the sky, disappearing from everyone's vision. Simultaneously, he appeared before Feng Xingjian and Erbian. Clearly, this silver-haired middle-aged man was the Mage Association's Silver Mage King. He was also the target that Erbian and Feng Xingjian were looking for this time around. He arrived before the two of them, but his gaze was fixed on Feng Xingjian. As the strongest Mage King in the Mage Association, the Silver Mage King's life could be said to be legendary and tough. In fact, before the age of 30, he had been living as a slave in the frozen lands of the northern wilderness. During these 30 years, the world had shown him an extremely cruel side. He had lost his lover, close friends, parents, and even hope. At the age of 30, his countenance was haggard, and his heart was like dead ashes. His limbs, heart, lungs, and brain had all suffered permanent damage during these 30 years. This was the first time in his life that he had felt despair. However, just then, he who had fallen to the lowest level of hell was saved by someone. The previous Silver Mage King had saved him, taught him martial arts, taught him divine arts, and allowed him to become a silver-robed mage. He had obtained unimaginable violence. The Silver Mage King, who had crawled out from the lowest level of hell, did not wallow in hatred. Instead, he learned how to save others. 10 years later, he saved countless people, families, and countries. He had witnessed countless tragedies, joys, and despair. However, no matter how hard he tried, he was unable to save everyone. Hatred and fighting were like an endless melody in this world. He was unable to stop people from harming each other no matter how hard he tried. From that moment on, he understood a logic. It was impossible to prevent the birth of tragedies just by relying on salvation. The entire northern wilderness, or even the entire miracle world, needed to undergo a complete reform from top to bottom. They needed to change the way people needed to survive and gain benefits through fighting, oppression, and exploitation. However, the Silver Mage King was stumped as to what method he should use to reform this world. He could use violence to rule a country, but he was unable to govern this country well. It was because even the youngest child herders knew how to snatch other people's bread. Therefore, he first used some small-scale tribes and towns to test out his idea. However, the repeated experiments caused him to feel greater and greater despair toward humans. No matter how hard he worked, humans were ultimately greedy, cruel, and would never be able to be satisfied. They would forever pursue that endless desire, and there would come a day when the system would deteriorate no matter what kind of system it was. After several decades of experiments, he even had the thought that there was no hope for humans. This was the second time in his life that he felt despair. It was also at this moment that he met a woman called Fong Yueru. Chapter 1095. The Silver Mage King chatted with Fong Yueru for a very long time. That conversation had benefited him greatly. Later on, he even entered Earth and observed the various historical, social, economic, and political systems on Earth. Although Earth power was not as great as Miracle World's, it was also because the ruler did not have absolute dominance. This made it easier for reforms. Within a short 1,000 years, the changes in Earth society surpassed the changes in Miracle World over several 10,000 years. What he had seen and heard on Earth had a great impact on the Silver Mage King's worldview. For the first time, he got to know technology and the importance of productivity. Of course, to him, the prowess of technology could not be compared to martial arts. The crux lay in the universality and replicability of technology. It allowed mankind's productivity to increase tremendously, allowing ordinary commoners to live a superior life. However, just as he was about to introduce technological products in a miracle world, he suddenly realized that it was impossible for these things to be popularized in Miracle World. One reason was that the physical parameters of the two worlds were different. The existence of ether particles made most of Earth's technological products unable to be used, and there was a need for an improvement process. This process was not difficult for the Silver Mage King, who had reached the divine level a long time ago. Fong Xingjian could easily modify it. Although the Silver Mage King, who had been at Tier 1 the divine level back then, was much weaker, he had only needed to spend a few more years. The difficulty lay in another reason. The other, more important reason was that no ruler would allow commoners and mortals to wield the same level of power as top-notch experts and rulers without much effort. That was something that no ruler would allow. Regardless of whether it was the Mage Association or some country's upper echelon, after the Silver Mage King promoted Earth's technological products, they either planned to cater to the Silver Mage King and adopt some technological products, looked down on them, and saw them as obscene techniques, or saw them as a great threat. Even if they adopted them, they would only let the upper echelon use them. The Silver Mage King understood that if technology was really introduced into this world, it would probably be controlled by a few people. Ordinary commoners would have no way of resisting and would only sink into deeper despair. All of this was because the structure of Miracle World and Earth were different. The people in this world held the greatest power and had productivity that far surpassed that of ordinary people. It was unlike Earth, where the experts in this world, especially the divine level experts, did not need the help of commoners. The existence of technological products would only worsen this situation, allowing experts, especially divine level experts, to completely break away from society and exist independently. When there is no need for a creature to exist, what will happen to it? At that time, the commoners of the world would probably become the playthings of the peerless powerhouses. The Silver Mage King understood that if he wished to truly reform this world, he would have to wait for an opportunity. He would have to wait for a time when all the people in power had reached an agreement with him or when everything was within his control. No one would be able to stop the world's transformation. The Silver Mage King threw a glance toward Feng Xingjian and said calmly, Erbian, get your people to stop coming over. I can't guarantee that I won't kill them every time. I can't leave the northern desolate lands matters to them. This will only lead to bloodshed and conflict. I got it. It's just a small matter. Look, Feng Xingjian has also joined us. Erbian looked at the Silver Mage King with anticipation in his eyes. Other than him, another Tier 7 Divine level expert has also agreed to join us. Are you still going to wait? Feng Xingjian and Erbian had reached an agreement at the same time. This could be said to be the gathering of the strongest powers in the entire miracle world. The only one who could stop them was probably the true master of this world, the white demonic god. The Silver Mage King threw a glance at the two of them and said, if the sky is really plunged down, what do you guys plan on doing? What do we plan on doing? What do you mean? Feng Xingjian asked puzzledly. The Silver Mage King asked seriously, if this world loses white's influence, then as the strongest experts in this world, it would be equivalent to us having control over this world's future. Then how do you guys plan on ruling and managing this world? Hearing this, Feng Xingjian was stunned for a moment. He wanted to break free from white's influence only because he wanted to break free from all the demonic god's control. It was because he felt that the curse of his 5-year lifespan was cast by the demonic gods and was influenced by some kind of divine art. Therefore, he wanted to break free from the demonic god's control and break through the limit of his 5-year lifespan. This was why he had joined this plan. Erbian said directly, my goal is only to get this world to break free from control. As for what happens in the future and how this world develops, I don't care as long as it's free. The Silver Mage King turned to look at Feng Xingjian. What about you? Feng Xingjian gave it some thought and said, it's the same for me. As long as I achieve my goal, I don't care how miracle world develops in the future. However, I'll definitely take care of my subordinates. Hee. Take care of your subordinates? The Silver Mage King stared into Feng Xingjian's eyes and said, the empire that you're ruling over is still extremely rotten. It's just that you're forcefully holding on with your powers. Feng Xingjian frowned and said, you want to reform the entire world? That's right. I want a world where everyone is equal, where there's no pressure to survive, no wars, no oppression, and where there's an abundance of resources. Everyone can do what they want to do, and where there's no more tragedy in the world, the Silver Mage King said as he stared at Feng Xingjian. Your idea is very good, but as long as humans still have desires and negative emotions, then it's impossible for such a world to exist. Feng Xingjian threw a glance at Erbian. The Silver Mage King's current thoughts were very similar to how Erbian had been in the past. Erbian fell silent, as if he had sunk into his past memories. That might be the case, but I feel that such a country still exists. The Silver Mage King's eyes flashed with an unfathomable glow, as if there were endless secrets hidden in them. All right, I can participate in your plan. Feng Xingjian frowned. He could sense that the Silver Mage King was the same as Erbian back then. He was not someone who would compromise. The fact that the Silver Mage King had agreed so easily made him feel that the Silver Mage King seemed to be hiding something. Just as Feng Xingjian and Erbian were gathering their companions in Miracle World, Earth, at the borders of the solar system, countless spatial ripples appeared, and amidst the stacking layers of ripples, several huge battleships that were comparable to the Himalayas gradually appeared. A lady dressed in a golden gown and covered in all sorts of metals, gemstones, and photons revealed a sorrowful expression. There seemed to be traces of tears at the corners of her eyes. You still haven't found him? She stood on the bridge and said with a sigh, my son is dead. The only son that my husband left behind for me is dead. You guys have spent a total of 10 years, but you haven't even found the murderer's shadow. What on earth are you guys doing? In the lady's hands, the heads of a man and a woman were clenched until they were slightly deformed. If Feng Xingjian was here, he would be able to recognize that this pair of man and woman were the Snake King and Zi Xing, who had also cleared the trial after he had defeated the Divine Emperor. Chapter 1096. Xing and the Snake King were the same challengers that Feng Xingjian had encountered in the past when he was clearing the stages in the apocalyptic world. It was also in that world that he had defeated the Divine Emperor and the Divine Emperor's mechanical army, obtaining countless technological information. This would be of great help to his cultivation in the future. Later on, in order to thank Feng Xingjian, Xing and the Snake King passed the double moon's projection technique to Feng Xingjian, allowing Feng Xingjian to grasp the ability to clear the stages simultaneously with many people. This had a great impact on the entire miracle world. However, at this moment, Xing and the Snake King's heads were held in someone's hands. As the power continued to press down on them, the structure of their brains kept on being damaged. Their eyes revealed hints of pain and terror. In the two metal coffins over 10 meters away, their headless corpses were restrained by invisible force fields. They were in so much pain that they were convulsing intensely, but they were unable to break free from the restraints of the force fields. Xing said with a horrified expression, "We've tried our best. He's here. He must be here." Next to her, Tian, she said furiously, "Don't beg for mercy from her. Old demonic woman, you wiped out my entire race and destroyed my home. I'll never forgive you." The woman who was holding the two heads smiled. Her face was filled with grace, and her eyes were filled with contempt toward all life. "If I'm unwilling, you can forget about dying." The woman's voice was gentle, but the words she revealed were chilling. "Help me look for him. Before we find that Beastra's starred, you'll have to suffer the impact of spiritual tremors day and night, enjoying that endless pain." As she spoke, a piece of ruby on the woman's forehead released an invisible wave that instantly entered Xing's and the Snake King's heads. Accompanied by this wave of spiritual tremors, both the heads and bodies of the two divine-level experts started to convulse intensely. Their bodies kept on trembling and contorting, as if they had sunk into some kind of intense agony. Even though they were divine-level experts, they were unable to endure it. Just then, a light figure appeared before the woman. It was a young lady wearing a blue and white uniform. She was also the artificial intelligence of this space battleship. In fact, all the functions of the entire battleship were under the control of this artificial intelligence. The only intelligent life forms on the battleship were this woman, Xing, and the Snake King. Aside from them, there was no one else on the massive battleship. The projection of the young girl said, "Master, intelligent life has been discovered. It's on the third planet in this star system." As she spoke, the projection of the entire solar system appeared before the woman. Then, as the woman's thoughts rapidly zoomed in and dragged it, the appearance of Earth was revealed. Looking at the Earth in front of her, the woman mumbled, "I hope you won't make any more mistakes this time." A moment later, the space dock below the space battleship opened, and a large number of small battleships the size of buildings emerged. These small battleships, controlled by artificial intelligence, paused for a moment before flying toward Earth at top speed. In Miracle World, after both the Prince and the Silver Mage King agreed to participate in this plan, Feng Xingjian and Erbian did not look for the Immortal Child. Although the Immortal Child was also a Tier 6 Divine level expert, he was White's believer and the saint of the Holy Sea of Truth. There were too many uncertainties in getting him to participate in the plan to rebel against White. As for the others, most of them were not strong enough and did not have the right to participate in this plan. Right now, what Feng Xingjian and Erbian needed to consider was the Western Land's influence. Earth, Miracle World, and Western Land were three worlds that were connected together with Miracle World as a transit station. Earth did not have top-notch martial prowess and was unable to interfere with their actions. However, the Western Land had Tier 8 or even Tier 9 Divine level experts. These experts were at the other end of the space-time passageway, which was equivalent to being in Miracle World's backyard. Feng Xingjian and Erbian had no choice but to consider their influence. We'll think of a way to close off the passageway connection on both sides. If that doesn't work, then we'll conquer or destroy them, Erbian said coldly. We only have one chance. We mustn't leave behind any future troubles. Moreover, the fact that the Western Land can be connected to Miracle World means that the Western Land has also been affected by white. Urbian's words revealed a hint of brutality and indifference. It was as if with just a few words, he had already decided the fates of several billion living beings in the other world. In fact, it was true that he had the right to do so. It was because although he had yet to recover his battle prowess to his prime, he had already taken a different path through his knight martial arts cultivation. His actual body was in an unobservable, untouchable, and unimaginable high-dimensional state. Such strength was a notch higher than even that of Fang Xingjian. They would only know who was stronger between him and a Tier 9 Divine level expert after they fought. Other than this, the preparations they had to make were the White Emperor Zenith Sword's 28 sections and the method to convert lifespan and strength. Urbian said, "I'll leave this matter to you. I'll head to the space-time passageway that leads to the Western Land to take a look at the situation and see if it could be closed off." Fang Xingjian nodded. Although he had understood the Royal Heavenly Great Arts cultivation method from Prince had not been honest when it came to other issues. Just then, Fang Xingjian suddenly frowned. It was because he discovered that he had instantly lost contact with a marshal he had left on Earth. It was as if he had been instantly killed before he had sensed the situation. However, who on Earth would be able to kill him instantly, even if it was just a stream of martial will? Ulpian turned his head and asked, "What's wrong?" "It's nothing. There's just a small situation, and I need to return to Earth to take a look." Fang Xingjian's body flashed and gradually dissipated into void space. If there's any situation, keep in touch. Having grasped the abilities of spatial translocation and time acceleration, regardless of whether it was a battle or long-distance movement, Fang Xingjian's current speed was so fast that it was at the level of superliminal speed. Almost at the same time that he dissipated, he arrived in the sky above the Western Land's coast. He immediately saw an astonishing scene. A tremendous amount of seawater was flowing toward the west, and the land's water level kept on lowering. It was as if there was an invisible sewer at the other end of the sea. Fang Xingjian's eyes narrowed slightly as he followed the flowing tides to the west. The tides grew increasingly ferocious, and the winds and waves on the sea grew increasingly greater. In the blink of an eye, the sky was filled with dark clouds, and the waves rose to over 10 meters tall. A tremendous amount of water vapor soared into the sky, forming rain clouds and thunder and lightning. Chapter 1097. The entire sea seemed to have entered a state of extreme fury, accompanied by thunderbolts, tempest, and tsunamis. In the center of all the tempest and tsunamis, a huge invisible hole floated at the interface between the seawater and the atmosphere. Its size was about half the size of the imperial capital, and it was crazily engulfing the atmosphere and seawater. A tremendous amount of water and air kept on flowing toward the hole, forming the scene of a violent tempest. Looking at the scene before him, Fang Xingjian frowned as he had a bad premonition. He split out a hint of his martial will and walked toward the hole. In the blink of an eye, the space-time before him swayed a little, and he discovered that he had arrived in a stretch of the universe's vacuum. A vast starry sky appeared before him, and there was a stretch of vacuum around him. Earth had completely disappeared. Behind Fang Xingjian, a tremendous amount of air and seawater kept on gushing out from void space, turning into all sorts of strange shapes and floating in the universe's vacuum. Earth has disappeared. The place where Earth and Miracle World overlapped was a stretch of sea. However, now that Earth had disappeared, Miracle World seawater and air kept on gushing into the universe's vacuum, creating the scene of violent tempest. In the sky above Miracle World, Fang Xingjian's martial will soared into the sky, turning into 3 streams of light that dissipated in the air. After understanding the situation, he immediately informed the prince, the Silver Mage King, and Urbian. "I think we're in trouble." After informing the 3 of them, Fang Xingjian's clone continued to explore the universe's vacuum. His martial will scan the surroundings at light speed and immediately discovered some strange traces. A short moment later, the prince, the Silver Mage King, and Urbian appeared on both sides of Earth and Miracle World's oceans. Each of them sent out a hint of their clone to investigate. They looked at the disappearing Earth and the huge hole above the Western Sea, and all of them revealed astonished expressions. Urbian shook his head. He was attempting to shrink the area where the space-time overlapped, but it was to no avail. If we don't make a move to stop it, Miracle World's oceans and atmosphere will probably be sucked dry within a month based on this speed. No mortals will be able to survive. A hint of fury and killing intent flashed on the Silver Mage King's face. He put out his hand and pressed down. An invisible force descended from the sky. The violent sea surface was smoothed out, turning into a blue mirror that did not move at all. At the same time, the boiling atmosphere also calmed down. Within a radius of 1,000 kilometers, there was no longer a trace of a breeze. The entire ocean suddenly became incomparably quiet. However, as the seawater and the atmosphere stopped flowing, an invisible spherical domain appeared between the sea and the atmosphere. The Silver Mage King had forcefully used his powers to block off the flow of seawater and air, exposing the area where the two worlds overlapped. No matter what, we need to act first to stop the disaster from spreading. Fang Xingjian attacked at the same time, invisible sword beams swirling around the spherical domain. Simultaneously, the prince and Urbian also made a move. Two streams of martial will, one gold and one silver, soared into the sky, encompassing the entire stretch of coast in the blink of an eye. Fang Xingjian and the other three could be said to be the strongest cultivators in Miracle World right now. Right now, the four of them joined forces, and endless forces instantly cut across the sky, suppressing the surroundings and encompassing the entire area where the space-time overlapped. They temporarily sealed off the connection between the two worlds and prevented the disaster from happening further. It was like using a plug to plug up a drain. Urbian said, "This seal can last for about a month. If the problem isn't resolved after a month, we'll have to continue maintaining the seal." The Silver Mage King asked, "Is there a way to close the space-time passageway?" Urbian said, "There's no way for now. The area where the space-time overlapped here is the same as the area in the Western land that I went to observe earlier. They were both set up by White's powers. Once we make a move, there'll probably be unpredictable effects." Simultaneously, the four people in the universe's vacuum were also analyzing the situation before them. There are no remnants and no heat radiation remnants. For the time being, we haven't discovered any obvious meteors in other parts of the solar system either. We can eliminate the possibility that the entire planet was blown up in one go, the prince said calmly. The Silver Mage King stroked his chin, looked at the faint spatial ripples that were slowly dissipating, and said, "It should be some kind of spatial interference means. The remnant force fields still cause space-time to distort. This means that..." Urbian raised his brows and said, "Someone captured the entire planet?" Fang Xingjian's gaze flickered, and he asked, "Can we track them? Let me verify it. It's fortunate that you discovered it early. If it had been more than 10 hours, then I wouldn't be able to track them." Urbian smiled, and hints of silver light flashed in his eyes. The entire world seemed to have become different in his senses. His gaze seemed to be able to penetrate through the timeline and see the scenes of the past few minutes. It was a stretch of piercing white light that encompassed the starry sky, and distorted space encompassed the entire Earth. Everything happened in an instant. By the time everyone reacted to it, the entire planet had already distorted and shrunk in an instant. Eventually, it was like a long noodle that was sucked into a palm-sized hole and completely disappeared. When Earth disappeared, only a palm-sized metal ball was left behind. It was as if this unbelievable metal ball had taken in the entire planet. Then, a few spaceships that were the size of buildings slowly appeared next to the metal ball. As several force fields appeared, one of the spaceships grabbed the metal ball and brought it back into its cabin. Unbelievable. What kind of technology is this? Urbian's eyes were completely covered by silver light as he said, Earth was shrunk to the size of a palm by some kind of spatial technology and then captured by a few spaceships. The spaceships themselves possess spatial jumping technology. They've gone to, at the next moment, Urbian had already brought the other three with him. He performed spatial translocation consecutively and leaped all the way to the borders of the solar system. Upon arriving, the four of them noticed a tremendous amount of heat energy remnant. Feng Xingjian looked at the radiation in the vacuum and said calmly, "They just left not too long ago. It doesn't seem to be an ordinary spatial jumping technique." Urbian grabbed out with his hand, and patches of colorful glow appeared before them. "It's quantum foam. They've gone to other universes through quantum foam." Quantum foam? Feng Xingjian was slightly stunned. He looked at the glow in Urbian's hand and suddenly reacted. He recalled that when he was striving for the divine level, he had to break through the limits of the microscopic world and reach a tunnel that had neither time nor space. That was clearly what Urbian called quantum foam. It was also a tunnel that led to other universes. However, when he was striving for the divine level, he had been unable to break through the tunnel and head to other universes even after going all out. As the saying goes, a grain of sand is a world. Each quantum foam can lead to a universe. At the end of time and space, it's just another new universe. With that, Urbian's eyes lit up with silver light once again. There are trillions of changes in quantum foam every second, and each of them leads to a different universe. Thankfully, they haven't left for long. I'll try to look for them. Chapter 1098. Countless changes flashed and disappeared in Urbian's eyes. It was as if there were countless universes appearing and disappearing before his eyes. At the next moment, a massive spaceship appeared and disappeared before him. He burst out streams of silver light and darted out with Feng Xingjian and the other two. Feng Xingjian and the others understood that Urbian did not have any ill intentions, so they did not resist. The four of them instantly turned into four extremely small dots and darted into some quantum foam with a swoosh, disappearing completely. In that instant, countless bizarre scenes appeared before Feng Xingjian. The colorful and absurd images seemed to be narrating the entire world's past and future. However, before he could react, they all disappeared without a trace. Back when Feng Xingjian was striving for the divine level, he had merely reached the eternal sword seigneur's position, even if he went all out. Right now, his martial art projection had attained a breakthrough to Tier 7 of the divine level, and his high-dimensional body was even more unfathomable. With this impact, he instantly passed through the passageway and arrived in another universe. What appeared before the four of them was an extremely massive piece of land that far surpassed that of Earth and Miracle World. This piece of land was placed in void space, and the surroundings were filled with absolute darkness and nothingness. However, the land itself kept on flashing with light, lighting up this stretch of darkness. There's almost no change in the flow of time. Feng Xingjian first checked the thing he was the most concerned about. He then looked at the land in front of him. He instantly scanned and calculated the specific data. It's at least 1/10 the size of the sun, and it's located in the dark region of the universe. There aren't any stars within a range of 100 light years, and it's not even in a certain galaxy. Clearly, this land itself has a massive power source. Urbian said, "It's not a land. Perhaps it's more appropriate to call it a spaceship." "A spaceship?" the prince asked puzzledly. Urbian nodded. "It's all formed from man-made metals. This is a man-made spaceship and not some naturally formed land. It's impossible for ordinary lands to exist in the universe's vacuum like this. In any case, let's go and take a look first. We must snatch Earth back." Feng Xingjian looked at the land in front of him with a hint of curiosity. He said, "Let's split up our clones and leave our real bodies outside." The eyes of the other three also gleamed as they looked at the piece of land before them. At the next moment, the four of them each sent out a hint of their martial will into the metal piece of land before them. Feng Xingjian turned into an invisible wave and approached the continent before him. With the power of time acceleration, space translocation, and high-dimensional sword arts, he passed through over 100 layers of defensive force fields of various colors and finally arrived in the continent's atmosphere. The metal continent in front of him, other than being surrounded by hundreds of defensive force fields of various colors, had an atmosphere that was very suitable for humans to live in. Even the gravity was not much different from the Earth that Feng Xingjian was on. Such a huge metal object didn't turn into a metal planet under the influence of gravity. Even the atmosphere and gravity are no different from Earth. It seems like the atmosphere and gravity have been modified intentionally. Is it because the intelligent life forms living here are closer to humans? Feng Xingjian sensed for a moment and then continued to descend. Very soon, he saw densely packed high-rise buildings that were like a steel forest. There were many high-rise buildings that were over 10,000 meters tall. What he saw before him was like a dense forest formed from steel. Countless flying devices flew rapidly between the high-rise buildings like insects. Every inch of space in the city was utilized to the extreme. The scenes that Feng Xingjian could see were all metal cities like this. There was not a hint of greenery at all. His marshal will scan the metal buildings and flying devices. He could see people with numb expressions everywhere. They were coming and going in a hurry, as if they were all rushing for time. Their appearances were almost no different from humans. Feng Xingjian's marshal will scan the bodies of these humans and thought. Their body structures are very similar to humans, but they are stronger than humans. Is this a parallel world? Through Feng Xingjian's probing, almost all of these people had the physical attributes of athletes. Out of every 100 of them, there was even one person whose physical attributes had reached the level of an Olympic champion. A small portion of them had even surpassed human standards and reached the level of a knight. Clearly, the average physical attributes of humans in this world were very high. As he continued to search, Feng Xingjian came to a cylindrical building. He immediately discovered that the building was filled with children between the ages of 5 to 18, and they were receiving education on various levels. Clearly, this was a school, and the way they received education was also very special. Most of them were lying in small cabins with their eyes tightly shut and their eyeballs moving around incessantly. There were also a portion of them who had a large number of wires inserted throughout their bodies, and they had sunk into a deep sleep. Is this some kind of method to directly imbue knowledge? Feng Xingjian guessed. Clearly, what he was seeing was a world with an extremely high level of technology. Their spatial, gravity, artificial intelligence, network, and other technological means far surpassed that of any of the worlds that Feng Xingjian had been to in the past. If I reveal myself too easily, I might be easily discovered. Before I find Earth, it's not suitable for me to act recklessly. Feng Xingjian still lacked an understanding of the world before him. Therefore, after wandering around for a while, his gaze suddenly narrowed, and he flew toward the roof of a school. He saw a young man standing at the edge of the building's roof. His eyes were filled with despair and sorrow. With a leap, he fell from the top of the building that was over 1,000 meters tall. At the sight of this, Feng Xingjian swayed slightly and turned into an invisible wave that darted into the young man's forehead. Since you don't want this body, then I'll take it. The young man's eyes suddenly glazed over for a moment, but they regained clarity at the next moment. During this short period of time, Feng Xingjian also read through the countless memories in the young man's brain. He could even directly create a brain from nothing. The structure of an ordinary human's brain was too simple for him at the moment, and reading through the memories of an ordinary human was as easy as breathing. Therefore, in just a short period of time, he had a general understanding of the world before him. His body continued to fall from the top of the building. However, he had only fallen 10 meters when two aircrafts appeared beside him, one on the left and one on the right. They shot out two force fields to hold him back. A cold mechanical voice rang out from the aircrafts. "Hogan Davis, you're suspected of illegally ending your own life and destroying private property. You'll be arrested and await trial. Do you have anything to say?" Fang Xingjian did not say anything. To him, it did not matter whether it was a trial or the law. He continued to read through the information in this world. Chapter 1099. Just like what Fang Xingjian saw, the world before him was a world where technology and productivity were highly developed. The entire world was situated on a piece of meadowland, and this meadowland itself was a huge flying shuttle that was 1/10 the size of the sun. The engine array in the flying shuttle had been providing the entire flying shuttle with an endless supply of energy. Although the young Hogan did not know the theory behind the engine array in his memories, his parents, teachers, and friends all said that it was some sort of perpetual motion machine that provided the people in the entire land with an endless supply of energy. The endless supply of energy not only helped the people in this world change the atmosphere, gravity, and other environments, making the world more suitable for living. It also allowed the entire flying shuttle to produce its own rations, upgrade the flying shuttle, and create all sorts of skyscrapers and high-tech products through mass energy conversion technology. It was like a small-scale universe that kept on expanding in all directions. In fact, ever since this flying shuttle was born, he had already gone through over 100 modifications and expansions. However, what made Fang Xingjian pay more attention to it was that this entire world actually belonged to a single person, a woman named Catherine. On this flying shuttle called the Morning Star, regardless of whether it was the flying shuttle, the energy, the various high-tech products, or even every inch of space, every breath, and every ray of sunlight, they all belonged to Catherine. Other than themselves, ordinary citizens had nothing. If they were to commit suicide or murder, it would be the most serious crime. They would completely lose their autonomy and become Catherine's slave forever. With such a world structure, if it were any other world, the entire world would have rebelled long ago, and the entire population would have revolted. However, on the Morning Star, Catherine held the highest authority, and the artificial intelligence was constantly monitoring the entire flying shuttle situation. She possessed countless weapons that could destroy cities, wipe out countries, and vaporize planets. Ordinary citizens had no ability to resist at all. This Catherine already has everything she needs to be self-sufficient. Then what is her goal in bringing up so many citizens? As he continued to flip through the young man's memories, Fang Xingjian gained a rough understanding. In fact, even if there were no humans on the Morning Star, it would still be self-sufficient. It would not need any help from humans, and there would not even be a need for them to work. However, Catherine had built cities, set up schools, and used some mechanisms to select talents. She had divided everyone into various grades. Talents of different grades would have different levels of authority, and they could even be equipped with all sorts of high-tech weapons. They would have even more authority over the citizens of a lower class. And the most important part of the so-called talent training, or rather, the decisive result, was the so-called strength of the spiritual ability. However, Catherine's objective in selecting talents was not something that could be found in the young man's memory. Spiritual energy? Just as Fang Xingjian was thinking about this, the two aircrafts had already taken Fang Xingjian to the place where the criminals were being held. Fang Xingjian's eyes flickered slightly, and he suddenly said, "Wait a moment, I want to take the psionic ability test." The two aircrafts came to an abrupt halt, and an invisible ray of light swept across Fang Xingjian's body. Then, several small robots the size of fingers flew around Fang Xingjian and pointed their tentacles at his body. The spiritual ability test has begun. Please output your spiritual ability freely. Psionic energy was the biggest factor that determined a person's status in this world. It was also the most important achievement for all students in school. In fact, as long as the psionic power was high enough, the suicide that the youth committed could be pardoned. What Fang Xingjian needed to do now was to fake a psionic ability result. From my memories, the so-called psionic ability is just a type of energy. Then, with a single thought from Fang Xingjian, streams of heat energy were emitted from his body. The tentacles that the machines had extended out trembled and absorbed all the heat energy. A short moment later, a voice rang out from the machines. Level 1 spiritual ability. Please take the test again. Level 1? What kind of joke is this? Feng Xingjian frowned, feeling puzzled. The heat energy he had released earlier was almost equivalent to the energy of a tank's main cannon. To think that it was only level 1? Could it be that there was a huge difference between spiritual energy and heat energy? Looking at the tentacles that had reached out once again, Feng Xingjian gave it some thought and decided to try increasing the heat energy output. He increased the heat energy output by 1,000 times. This time around, it was at the level of a Tomahawk cruise missile. Level 3 spiritual ability. Please take the test again to confirm. Feng Xingjian thought to himself, interesting. From what I know, there are over 100 levels of spiritual ability, right? To think that this is only level 3? Do the humans in this world really not have any extraordinary powers? In young Hogan's memories, there was no such thing as extraordinary powers. Everything operated under the ice-cold laws of physics, and there was no power that could surpass that of technology. Feng Xingjian released the heat energy once again, confirming that he had reached level 3 of spiritual ability. After all, level 3 of spiritual ability was enough to exempt him from the crime of committing suicide. Outside the Meadowland, in the universe's vacuum, Feng Xingjian and the other 3 stood in the sky above the land, looking down at the massive spaceship that seemed to have no end. Their eyes revealed an unfathomable expression. The prince smiled. This is an interesting place. To think that a queen is ruling over the world. I wonder what kind of magnificent story it will be. The Silver Mage King frowned. This woman is vicious and merciless. She single-handedly oppresses the world and exploits the people. This world isn't stable, and it's impossible for even machines to be perfect. I found many rebel forces. Urbian touched his chin as if he was also very interested in the world before him. In this world, that Catherine is the only master. She's the master of all matter in the world. It's clear that she's the only one who could have taken away Earth. However, we can't just take back Earth. There are indeed many valuable things in this world. The corners of Feng Xingjian's lips curled up into a hint of a smile. However, that Catherine isn't someone to be trifled with. Everyone must make sufficient preparations. The 4 top-notch experts each try to understand the world under their feet from different aspects. They then stood in void space and conversed. It was as if they had encountered a rare gem and were discussing how they should split it up. Just as the 4 experts were discussing how they should conquer this world, Catherine, who was at the highest point of the spaceship, a huge tower that was 100,000 meters tall, casually tossed the metal sphere that contained Earth into the wall. It was as if she was tossing a piece of trash. Before the sphere could get close, it was caught by a force field and floated slowly in midair. Behind the sphere, there were a myriad of miniature planets that looked exactly the same as it. Catherine said calmly, "Analyze this Earth thoroughly and find traces of that be asterisk-starred. Feng Xingjian." Understood. In that instant, countless rays swept across the miniature Earth, immediately causing a great commotion on Earth. Simultaneously, a piece of information entered Catherine's mind. Her brows raised, and a ferocious aura appeared on her face. There are still people who aren't afraid of death and dare to come looking for me? Chapter 1100. As Catherine's brows raised, a few projections appeared before her. They were the surveillance images of the entire Morning Star. This extremely massive spaceship was installed with densely packed surveillance equipment. All of them were controlled by artificial intelligence, constantly monitoring the entire spaceship from all directions. Right now, one could see a large number of spaceships leaping and appearing in the sky above the Morning Star. Densely packed spaceships kept on appearing, and their numbers were so great that it left one speechless. The Silver Shadow Empire's good-for-nothings have caught up? The corners of Catherine's lips curled up into a hint of a disdainful smile. Didn't they just take over 10 planets? Daily, kill them all. The artificial intelligence replied, "Understood." At the next moment, Large numbers of space combat aircrafts soared into the sky from the Morning Star, charging out toward the space fleets that were chasing after them. It was because the entire Morning Star was protected by over 100 layers of force field for the sake of the Metal City and the millions of civilians on it. This was both a protection and a restriction, preventing the Morning Star from casually using the weapons in the spaceship to shoot out. However, the battle prowess of the space combat aircrafts was not weak either. In the blink of an eye, the two fleets had already come into contact. Streams of scorching plasma light pillars cut across the universe's horizon, and countless light spots would occasionally explode and disappear in the darkness. Each space combat aircraft was like an agile fish that cut across the sky. While dodging the other party's cannons, they kept on shooting out streams of high-energy lasers or bombs to attack the other party's battleships. The Silver Shadow Empire's fleet was as stable as a mountain, relying on the superalloy hull and plasma shields to defend against the waves of attacks. They would also occasionally use plasma cannons and super electromagnetic cannons to attack the other battleships. In the blink of an eye, the battle between both parties had entered a white-hot state. In the Silver Shadow Empire's fleet, there was a battleship that was the largest, which was the size of Demonic City. Over 10,000 people were controlling the battleships and weapons, going all out to fight against Catherine's side. Catherine's space combat aircrafts were not the only ones that were unmanned. In fact, most of the battleships in the Silver Shadow Empire's fleet were also unmanned and controlled from afar. All the personnel were gathered on this huge command ship with the strongest defense. The densely packed fleet in the surroundings surrounded and protected it completely. In the command ship's central command room, the commander of the Silver Shadow Empire's expeditionary forces, Mike Dowland, narrowed his eyes as he looked at the battle situation in the projection. He calmly said, "Catherine has a perpetual motion machine. Don't give her a chance to stall for time. Crush her in one go." A short moment later, the entire space fleet ignored all the clear gunfire and advanced at full speed, crashing toward the ground on the Morning Star. Looking at this scene from afar, it was as if a densely packed locust swarm was advancing incessantly. At every moment, there would be a myriad of battleships falling and collapsing under the attacks of the cannons. However, it was this opportunity that the entire fleet relied on their speed, quality, and numbers to smash fiercely toward the Morning Star with an unstoppable momentum. Above the command ship, Feng Xingjian, Prince, Erbian, and the Silver Mage King stood together, looking at the majestic battlefield that spanned across several 100,000 kilometers. The Crown Princess looked at the battlefield before her with an excited expression. Streams of golden sword cheese appear behind her, seeming to be raring to go. "What do you think? Let's make a move." The Silver Mage King also said, "I can activate Catherine's resistance forces and work together from the inside. We can catch her off guard." Feng Xingjian and Erbian did not comment, seeming as if they did not agree with this decision. "What are you guys waiting for?" The prince said impatiently, "This is the best chance. We still don't know what Catherine's trump card is. If that perpetual motion machine is real, then her strength mustn't be underestimated." Feng Xingjian blinked slightly and said, "The Silver Shadow Empire?" Within a short moment, a hint of his marshal will invaded the fleet's command ship and read a soldier's memories. At the next moment, the memories were split into 3 parts and sent to the prince, the Silver Mage King, and Erbian. Silver Shadow Empire? To think that a massive empire that traversed across several galaxies crossed parallel universes in order to pursue Catherine? Erbian said calmly, "It seems that this Catherine is quite good at stirring up trouble." At the next moment, his gaze narrowed slightly, and he said, "Everyone, I've found the perpetual motion machine." Clearly, Erbian had been getting his clone to search for the perpetual motion machine in the Morning Star during this period of time. It was clearly an extremely difficult and complicated task to search for the so-called perpetual motion machine in such a massive spaceship. However, to Erbian, who possessed spatial translocation, high-dimensional sensory abilities, and other abilities, it was a very simple task. Feng Xingjian soon received the news regarding the perpetual motion machine. With one look, he was astonished along with the prince and the Silver Mage King. A short moment later, the Silver Mage King frowned. To think that there's such a thing? Just then, over 10 space battleships flew several hundred kilometers away from them, surrounding Feng Xingjian and the other three tightly. Electromagnetic life forms. Report your identities. Hearing the electromagnetic signals coming from the spaceships, Feng Xingjian was slightly speechless. He had not expected that the people from the Silver Shadow Empire would really be able to discover their existence and treat them as some kind of electromagnetic life forms. On the command ship, the commander-in-chief, Mike Darren, looked at the report and said coldly, "It's just a few electromagnetic life forms. Is there a need to report to me? Kill all of them." The adjutant was stunned for a moment before saying, "But there have never been any electromagnetic life forms among Catherine's subordinates. These few might also be people who are looking for her for revenge. They can cooperate with us. It's just 4 electromagnetic life forms. According to the detector's index, their energy is only about that of a plasma cannon," Mike Darren said coldly. "Sirs, we're currently in a war, and we're facing the most ferocious enemy that the Empire has ever encountered in its history. This isn't a game, and it's not the time for you to promote the spirit of humanitarianism. Crush them. We have the upper hand right now. You guys must eliminate any factors that could affect the outcome of the war." With Mike Darren's command, the few battleships surrounding Feng Xingjian and the other 3 opened fire. Over 100 plasma cannons covered the location where the 4 of them were. The high temperature of several 100,000 degrees Celsius was sufficient to vaporize and disintegrate any electromagnetic life forms. However, at the next moment, streams of golden sword light soared into the sky, tearing apart all the plasma cannons that were shooting toward them. Following that, the crown princess body swelled up abruptly, becoming like a giant that could support the heavens and earth. She appeared in the middle of the battlefield, and the moment she appeared, her massive body crushed several thousand space battleships. Chapter 1101. Damn it, what the hell is this? Mike Darren looked in disbelief at the female golden giant that had appeared in the battlefield projection. He said in astonishment, "Where's the scouting department? What are you guys doing? Didn't they say that the energy intensity of these electromagnetic life forms is very low?" "We don't know either. The other party probably has some kind of energy storage method that we don't know about. We're unable to detect it with our current means." "Then what about now?" Mike Darren suppressed the fury in his heart and said, "What's his energy index?" Nine. Hearing the other party's stuttering voice, Mike Darren bellowed, "How much is it?" Unable to measure. It's beyond the range of measurement. There might be something wrong with the equipment. What kind of joke is this?" Mike Darren's countenance darkened. He pointed to the female golden giant on the projection and said furiously, "Kill her." The virtual image that Prince had displayed stood in the universe's vacuum, letting out a soundless bellow toward the sky. At the next moment, he struck out across space with his palm, and a golden light rose up in void space like a sun. A myriad of battleships and fighter aircrafts exploded across space, turning into a bunch of fireworks that were released in the universe. Ha 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 ha. Aren't you guys going to join in? After consecutively destroying several 100,000 battleships, Prince felt exhilarated and shouted toward Feng Xingjian and the other 2. "There are about 350 million battleships in this fleet. You alone will be enough to deal with them," Feng Xingjian said. "Catherine's trump card has been exposed. Let's go and deal with her." To people like Feng Xingjian and Erbian, who stood at the pinnacle of the world, they would be even more careful when they did things. It was because only at their level would they have a better understanding of how many powerful abilities and unbelievable ultimate moves existed in this world. Therefore, before they understood Catherine, none of them had made a move. However, now that they understood Catherine's trump card, they no longer had any reservations, and all of them revealed themselves. "I'll go first." The Silver Mage King took a step forward and performed spatial translocation. He crossed over 100 layers of defensive force fields on the outer layer of the Morning Star and appeared in the atmospheric environment. Then, with a tearing motion with both hands, he tore apart the metal land under his feet across space. Countless tall buildings tumbled out, and the layers of metal decks that could withstand nuclear fusion attacks and high-energy photon cannons were torn apart and then tumbled out. The Silver Mage King forcefully created an extreme canyon that was several thousand kilometers long and several hundred kilometers deep. On the Morning Star's tower, almost at the same instant that the Prince and the Silver Mage King made their moves, Catherine sensed the changes. She frowned as she looked at the golden giant on the screen and the Silver Mage King who was tearing apart the Morning Star's outer armor. The pernicious aura on her face grew increasingly intense. A bunch of clowns. Do they really think that I'm easy to bully? Just as she was thinking about how to deal with these enemies, the artificial intelligence daily displayed a projection before her. It was Feng Xingjian and Erbian, who had appeared in outer space. Feng Xingjian's body was highlighted, enlarged, and displayed before Catherine. Master, we've discovered Feng Xingjian. Catherine's eyes lit up. He's Feng Xingjian. According to the comparison of the images in the database, the similarity between their appearances is close to 95%. With a thought, the metal floor under her feet seemed to turn into a pool of mercury, and Xing's and the Snake King's heads slowly popped out. Catherine said coldly, "The two of you take a look. Is it a Feng Xingjian you encountered?" Although the Feng Xingjian before them was very similar to the one in the database. As someone who had the experience of traversing through parallel universes, it was not as if Catherine had never encountered Feng Xingjian from other parallel universes. Xing and the Snake King looked at the Feng Xingjian in the image, and a hint of bewilderment flashed in their eyes. The Snake King took a glance and then lowered his eyelids, saying coldly, "I don't know him." Xing hesitated for a moment before apologizing inwardly. She said, "If we're just looking at his appearance, then there's no mistake. It's him." Catherine smiled, and there seemed to be flames of vengeance burning in her eyes. Even if it's not the real him, he's still in existence from his parallel world. She grinned, and a hint of sorrow flashed on her face. "Send out the God Massacre team to capture him. They must capture him alive. I want to judge him personally." Other than the battle between Feng Xingjian's group and Catherine, the battlefield in the universe had turned into a state of chaos with the prince's participation. The golden female giant rammed and slapped out wantonly. Each of her punches and kicks could cause a large area of space to distort and force field compression. Those extremely sturdy space battleships that could traverse wormholes and perform space jumps were destroyed one after another. In a mere few seconds, several 10 million battleships were crushed, turning into many huge fireworks that exploded and scattered out in space. The various weapons from the Silver Shadow Empire, be it high-energy lasers, electromagnetic cannons, plasma cannons, or even positron cannons, were all ineffective. When they struck onto the prince's body, other than causing some slight tremors, they did not even leave a single mark on the virtual image. In the command center, Mike Darren slammed the table and shouted, "Who can tell me what on earth this thing is?" No one said a word. Looking at the battleships that were being continuously destroyed in the battlefield projection, everyone's foreheads broke out in cold sweat unknowingly. Mike Darren let out a cold snort. "Prepare to use the retraction cannon and get rid of this monster in one go." Hearing this, everyone's countenances turned grim. The so-called retraction cannon had a more descriptive name, the Black Hole Cannon. It was a powerful weapon that could change gravity through antimatter. A shot from the Black Hole Cannon could even tear apart Star. The Silver Shadow Empire's expeditionary force had only brought along a total of 3 Black Hole cannons this time around. All of them had been prepared for the Morning Star, but they had not expected that they would be used on the Prince. A few minutes later, over 100 million battleships had been lost in the entire fleet. Wreckage filled up the entire place and scattered across the universe's vacuum. It was like an interstellar graveyard. The entire command ship started to change shape and stretch out. Very soon, A huge cannon muzzle was revealed. Almost at the same instant the cannon muzzle appeared, the prince's brows raised. His sudden inspiration had already sensed an intense threat. At the next moment, a stretch of darkness, accompanied by a white glow, extended out in all directions with her chest as the center. A large part of the prince's virtual image was instantly engulfed, and an extremely huge sphere that was encompassed by a white halo took up her entire body. That was not all. With the explosion of the black hole cannon, the space, time, and gravity in the entire stretch of the universe underwent a tremendous change. Chapter 11:02. As the black hole missile exploded, a large number of battleships that had not been able to retreat in time were dragged by the violent gravitational force, stretching out into many curved lines as they flew toward the center of the black hole. Prince, who had been struck by this attack head-on, suffered serious injuries. Both his martial will and his thoughts entered a state of blankness under that terrifying gravitational force. His consciousness seemed to have entered a state of complete suspension. As the black hole's volume and gravitational force increased rapidly, the other parts of Prince's virtual image were also dragged crazily, cutting across a series of distorted space and flying toward the center of the black hole. On the command ship, Mike Darren let out a breath as he looked at the various reports sent by the investigation department and the projection of the battlefield that was filled with black light and shadows that engulfed everything. He thought, "It's finally settled." He then gave out an order. Order all battleships to retreat and leave the area of effect of the black hole. Wait for the black hole to die completely before attacking. Just as Prince was about to be engulfed completely by this black hole missile, Urbian made his move. This attack was world-shaking. Endless silver light scattered down from void space like a waterfall. When these energies that had descended from high-dimensional space-time arrived in the physical world, they instantly turned into countless photons and were then shattered. Each shattered photon would produce an electron and a positron. The entire process had undergone a mass energy conversion, turning energy into matter. Countless silver light appeared in void space and then turned into densely packed silver metals. They were like silver ocean waves, gushing out in the direction of the black hole. After a black hole was created, it would crazily engulf everything in the surroundings, not even letting off light. However, this engulfment was not limitless. As the engulfed mass reached the limits of the black hole, it would start to die. Right now, what Urbian was doing was releasing his own energy and then undergoing a mass energy conversion, turning energy into matter and using it to fill up the black hole before him. With this series of actions, the appearance of the silver waves in the sky greatly slowed down the black hole's expansion. The Crown Princess also took this opportunity to regain her mobility. Accompanied by a series of intense tremors, the virtual image was completely torn apart, and a small portion of her body escaped from the edge of the black hole. Having almost been killed with a single attack, Prince's face was filled with fury. The endless golden light rippled out like water for a while, before once again turning into a giant that was about the size of Earth. "You are courting death." A wave of sword will spread out from the prince's body. The Son of Heaven's sword manipulation technique was activated. At this moment, the prince no longer held back. The destructive prowess that the prince, who had reached Tier 7 of the divine level, unleashed at full power had even surpassed her own imagination. A myriad of sword light shot out from the surface of the prince's body. It was as if a star had collapsed and a supernova had exploded. Piercing light engulfed all optical observation means, and violent electromagnetic waves burned up all the electronic devices on the entire spaceship. The high temperature scorched the entire stretch of void space, and countless battleships were vaporized into clumps of plasma. Seeing that the number of the entire fleet was decreasing at a speed visible to the naked eye, Mike Darren, who was on the command ship, shouted furiously, "Stop her! Damn it, why did the black hole bomb stop expanding? Where did the explosion come from? Why are the weapons malfunctioning?" Seeing that the entire fleet was defeated, Mike Darren could only give another order, Retreat cannons. Launch the retreat cannons again. Don't let her come near. By now, he no longer cared about the Morning Star. Being able to deal with this monster was already the most important thing to him. However, just as he gave the order, he discovered that there was no one in the command room, which was initially filled with people. There was no one in front of all the control stations. The huge command room was completely silent, and not a single sound could be heard. At the sight of this scene, Mike Darren was slightly stunned. He stood up abruptly and shouted toward the empty command room. "Where's everyone? Where did everyone go?" A strange and horrifying feeling slowly welled up in his heart. At the next moment, he suddenly heard a loud, crashing sound. It was just like the sound of the waves he had heard at the seaside in his hometown. However, in this universe's vacuum, how could there possibly be the sound of waves in the spaceship's command room? Just as he was feeling extremely puzzled, the sound of the waves intensified once again. Mike Darren turned his head abruptly and saw a huge wave formed from fresh blood gushing over from the door. A pungent smell of blood came gushing over, and the strong and choking smell seemed as if it was going to take on a material form. The viscous blood wave expanded out rapidly in the blink of an eye, instantly engulfing most of the command room and then gushing out toward Mike Darren's body. Looking at the gushing blood wave, Mike Darren could only take 2 steps back before he was completely drowned by the overwhelming amount of blood. Fang Xingjian appeared from the blood wave. In his eyes, there were no blood waves at all. The entire command room was calm, but countless soldiers had fallen to the ground and fallen unconscious. All of them had fainted from all sorts of horrifying, strange, or sorrowful illusions. The Fang Xingjian who had appeared before him was the Heart Sword Path martial art projection. He had used top-notch illusory arts to destroy the wills of everyone on the command ship. Just then, Mike Darren, who had fallen unconscious, suddenly opened his eyes. He struggled to stand up, only to see the fleet's warriors lying all over the ground. "Oh!" Fang Xingjian turned and smiled when he saw the horrified commander. "Your willpower isn't bad. Then I won't have to hold back too much." In Mike Darren's eyes, the black-haired man suddenly started to melt. In the blink of an eye, he turned into a blood monster that was seething and bellowing. The blood monster opened its mouth, and the heads of his comrades were struggling, begging for mercy, and howling in grief. It was as if this monster's mouth was connected to hell. You guys, what on earth are you guys?" Mike Darren bellowed. At the next moment, the monster's mouth opened up crazily, and in the end, it swallowed him whole. The moment he entered the monster's mouth, countless pale white hands reached out, as if wanting to drag him into the depths of hell. As a series of astonished cries rang out, the commander fainted completely. As all the soldiers on the command ship fell unconscious, the entire Silver Shadow Empire's fleet entered a state of complete paralysis. They were no longer able to fend off the prince's attacks. The Heart Sword Path martial art projection walked on the command ship and made a judgment inwardly. If we judge this fleet's battle prowess in terms of head-on attacks, it's actually above that of a Tier 6 or even Tier 7 Divine level expert. If we were to fight head-on, just the black hole missile alone is something that none of us, with the exception of Erbian, will be able to fend off. However, victory isn't determined by head-on attacks. If we're talking about the application of light speed movement and spatial translocation in terms of being small and compact, this fleet won't be able to do so. They won't be able to perform spatial translocation and light speed movement as they wish to attack and dodge like divine-level experts. At this time, the pilots will be their greatest weakness. As he walked, he performed a few spatial translocations consecutively, darting between the ships and arriving in the universe. He looked at the prince who was still attacking the fleet crazily and said, "All right, things here have ended. Let's prepare for the matters on the Morning Star." Chapter 1103. On the Morning Star in Lanua City. Beside a huge stretch of man-made sea, countless men and women with high spiritual ability levels were enjoying the rare sunlight and beach. In this world, the beach could be said to be an extremely precious natural resource. Those whose spiritual ability levels were below level 30 would almost never have the chance to see the beautiful scenery in their entire lives. However, over half an hour ago, a tremendous amount of sparks suddenly flashed in the sky, filling up the entire sky like exploding fireworks. Everyone unknowingly turned their gazes toward the sky, looking at the increasingly concentrated flames, explosions, and flashes of light. All of them wore astonished expressions. Someone is attacking the morning star. How can this be? Don't worry. With the spaceship's defensive measures, there's no one in this world who can attack it. Just as everyone was feeling worried and afraid of the scene before them, a silver-haired young man lay on the beach in boredom. He looked at the battlefield in the sky and said helplessly, "How troublesome." At the next moment, golden light illuminated the entire sky. All the humans on the morning star saw a shocking scene. Piercing golden light encompassed the entire sky, vaporizing all the matter it came into contact with. Even the morning star's protective force field outside was rapidly weakening, incessantly evaporating from the explosions of this golden light. Boom! Amidst the seething sound waves, a huge golden palm that could encompass an entire city slammed onto the protective force field. A power that could overturn rivers and seas and destroy continents erupted in an instant, destroying over 10 layers of protective force fields. The golden giant lay on top of the protective force field, its fists hammering incessantly onto the morning star like small asteroids colliding into it time and time again. Each attack could destroy the Earth's ecosphere. The morning star started to tilt slightly from the continuous attacks. The man-made sea was in a state of overturning rivers and seas. The sea struck the city furiously, and the metal ground showed signs of tearing apart slightly. The silver-haired young man stood up helplessly, looked at the panicking crowd, shook his head, and said, "There's really nothing we can do. But with the way things are going, that God Massacre team should be setting off soon, right?" At the next moment, his eyes narrowed, and he seemed to have seen the sky several 10,000 kilometers away. Several tens of silhouettes soared into the sky, dashing toward the golden giant. However, before they could get close, they were stopped by a myriad of sword light that suddenly erupted in void space. It was Feng Xingjian's celestial eradication, sword technique, martial art projection. The infiltrating void, light pursuit, all-conquering, and instant sword intense kept on moving and slashing around the martial art projection. In the blink of an eye, they were locked in a battle with the God Massacre team. Huge flames would occasionally erupt in the sky, and scorching gales would descend, causing scorching gales. Scorching gales would descend from the sky, blowing down from the sky above the sky, and the people on the ground would flee. A woman with a ponytail and a pair of swords in her hands, each thrust of her swords able to devour space. She was the closest to the celestial slaying sword technique projection. The two of them fought as they moved. Wherever they passed, shock waves would howl and space would distort. Each time the swords clashed with each other, an explosion would instantly destroy a city. They kept on chasing after Feng Xingjian, appearing and disappearing unpredictably. All of their attacks were fended off by the celestial eradication, sword technique, martial art projections, light speed movements, and spatial translocation. The celestial eradication, sword technique, martial art projection would also occasionally counterattack with the four great sword intense, causing blood to splatter in all directions. Looking at the few people who were in hot pursuit, Feng Xingjian's eyes narrowed slightly. Androids? Almost every one of them isn't below Tier 6 of the divine level. At the next moment, he turned his head abruptly and thrust out his sword as if he had foreseen the future. His sword collided with the sword that had also pierced out from void space. The two swords clashed, and seething air currents formed plasma lumps that gushed out in all directions, vaporizing everything they encountered along the way. The fighter aircrafts that had wanted to rush up to provide reinforcements were also turned into ashes with a single attack. Looking at the woman who had entered void space with a single sword attack, the corners of Feng Xingjian's lips curled up slightly. Interesting sword technique. That young female android shouted, "Demon, I won't let you guys destroy this world." On the other side, there was no one left on the beach. The earthquake and tsunami that the Golden Giant's attack had created had destroyed this place. However, that silver-haired young man continued to stand on the spot. After looking at the battle between the Celestial Eradication, Sword Technique Martial Art Projection, and the God Massacre team, he then turned to look in another direction. Ulpian stood 10,000 meters up in the sky, attacking across space with both hands. Each attack would cause the heavens to crumble and the earth to crack. He tore through over 100 layers of armor plates in one go and continued to advance toward the core of the Morningstar. A myriad of fighter aircrafts in the surroundings charged forth like tidal waves. However, with a single glance from him, all of them exploded across space, turning into many fireballs. These fighter aircrafts were unable to get close to him with just spatial translocation alone. Before they could even get close, parts of their bodies would be moved away, exploding in midair. The silver-haired young man shook his head and looked in the direction of the tower. He saw that in front of the tower where Catherine was, another golden giant with a height of over 100,000 meters suddenly appeared with a flash. Although this giant was many times smaller than the prince's virtual image, it appeared more condensed and realistic. There seemed to be countless prints twisting on its golden skin, and with each twist, layers of stacking force fields would erupt. It was Feng Xingjian's Royal Heavenly Great Art Martial Art Projection. The moment the martial art projection appeared, it slapped out fiercely toward the tower with a Royal Heavenly Great Palm imprint. The martial will's glow collided with a layer of plasma shield in midair. Countless molecules and atoms shattered and exploded, and the light and flames produced engulfed the area within a range of 100 lis in the blink of an eye. Feng Xingjian, you're courting death. Under Zixing's and the Snake King's horrified gazes, a huge crystal-colored mecha soared into the sky under Catherine's control, colliding fiercely with the Royal Heavenly Great Art Martial Art Projection. It was this mecha that had destroyed Zixing's and the Snake King's planet, wiping out their civilization. Right now, when they saw this mecha again, despair once again appeared in their eyes. It was the result of countless top-notch experts attacking it for 3 days and 3 nights, but they were all wiped out in the end. The Royal Heavenly Great Art Martial Art Projection's countenance was unchanging, showing neither sorrow nor joy. Faced with the crystal mecha, he struck out with a palm that accelerated time and spatial translocation. Seething powers exploded within the crystal mecha. However, before the explosive powers could really erupt, the crystal mecha had already instantly flashed to the side, dodging this attack. It's useless. This god-exterminating mecha is equipped with quantum sensory organs and can see all future attacks. It's impossible for you to defeat it. Catherine's voice was accompanied by a series of waves, transmitting out in the Royal Heavenly Great Art Martial Art Projection's mind. Feel fear, Feng Xingjian. I'll make you return what you've done to my son 10-fold or 100-fold. As Catherine's mecha made its move, countless holes opened up on the Morningstar, and densely packed fighter aircrafts gushed out like swarms of insects, turning the entire metal land into a battlefield. Chapter 1104. Even though Urbian was busy dealing with the black hole missile's prowess and did not make a move, under the joint attacks of the Prince, the Silver Mage King, and Feng Xingjian, the entire Morningstar seemed to be in chaos. The densely packed mecha aircrafts drowned out the sky, and the Golden Giant kept on tearing apart the spaceship's protective force field. It seemed as if it was tearing apart the sky. Many mecha attacked the Golden Giant, but they were unable to leave behind any marks. They were destroyed by the surging golden waves. The middle-aged man who was commanding the mecha group looked at the roaring giant with a grim gaze. What kind of monster is this? Plasma cannons, mass destruction missiles, EMPs, matter disintegration missiles, and gravitational missiles are all ineffective. Continue to send out troops. We mustn't let him enter the Morningstar. On the ground, the celestial eradication, sword technique, martial art projection, and the god massacre team fought as they moved. Wherever they passed by, everything was wiped out, and many cities were leveled to the ground. The young female android's gaze was filled with killing intent as she looked at Feng Xingjian. Demon, I'll definitely kill you. The other android warriors also wore cold expressions. Although they did not say anything, the output of their attacks increased again. As Feng Xingjian smiled softly, for streams of instant sword intense slashed fiercely onto the ponytailed young female android's body, slicing off her limbs. Meanwhile, he was also surrounded by the countless saber light and sword shadows from the others. At the next moment, he was completely engulfed by the high temperature that soared into the sky. Next to the tall tower on the Morning Star, the entire tower was still wrapped up by the dense particle shield and was safe and sound. Xing and the Snake King looked worriedly in the direction of the battlefield. They saw the royal heavenly great martial art projection and the god annihilating mecha engaged in battle. Each royal heavenly great palm imprint would send out a myriad of air currents, and plasma light balls soared into the sky. Within a short few minutes, the sky and earth collapsed, and 5,000 meters of the ground were shaved off. It was as if the entire Southeast Asia had sunk. However, no matter what kind of attack it was, the god annihilating mecha could use teleportation to dodge the strongest attacks. As for the repercussions of the attacks, they were unable to break through the many layers of energy shields on its body and the defense of the liquid buffer metal. On the other side of the metal land, a huge tunnel with a diameter of over 1,000 kilometers appeared on the surface of the ground. It was like a tunnel that led straight to the Earth's core, wanting to reach the deepest part of the Morning Star. This was clearly what the Silver Mage King was doing. Just then, the sky suddenly lit up. The black hole had died completely, and with the death of the black hole, a white hole was born. The matter that had just been devoured was spat out again, as if there was no end to it. It was also accompanied by a large number of high-energy rays that could kill all the living creatures in an entire galaxy. God save us. The commander of the fighter fleet looked at the scene in the sky, and his face turned extremely pale. Silver light and shadows smashed down toward the Morning Star like a meteor shower. It was a weight that could be compared to a few Earths smashing down. It was as if hundreds or thousands of asteroids were smashing over concurrently. Even with the Morning Star size, it was impossible for it to ignore them. The entire scene looked as if the sky was really falling and the Earth was sinking. The entire spaceship kept shaking, and pieces of the metal continent were torn apart amidst the shaking. As the waves of chaos gradually spread toward the entire Morning Star, frequent earthquakes occurred, and large areas of armor plates were torn apart. Countless cities were engulfed by the high temperature. But what was even more terrifying was that the entire defensive force field was beginning to collapse under this barrage of attacks. After countless matter and high-energy rays broke through the defensive force field, they collided mercilessly toward the ground. The entire surface of a Morning Star instantly turned into a series of sparks. The young female android's limbs had just turned into liquid metal and grew out when she saw this apocalyptic scene. No! The other members of the God Massacre team, and the Celestial Eradication, Sword Technique martial art projection were instantly engulfed by countless high-quality projectiles and high-energy rays. Since the start of the battle, the citizens on the Morning Star had been led by the robots to hide in the underground fortifications. These fortifications were densely distributed all over the Morning Star, allowing most of the citizens to hide in them and defend against disasters. Sensing the incessant tremors coming from the ground, hints of terror kept on growing in everyone's hearts. Feng Xingjian walked among the crowd and took in a deep breath. It was as if he had inhaled the smell of terror into his nose. His fingers then flicked a few times, and invisible waves spread out among the crowd. The terror on everyone's faces seemed to have become even more severe. Similar scenes appeared in the countless fortifications on the Morning Star. Sensing people's terror and controlling their terror, everyone's group consciousness seemed to have been unknowingly grasped by him. The crimson-red helix penetrated deep into the morning star's group consciousness at rapid speed. In the blink of an eye, it arrived at the center of the group consciousness. This was a projection with countless clones that were spreading terror and controlling emotions. Chapter 1105. The sword light that cut across the horizon descended from the sky. Its width was over 1,000 kilometers, and its length was over 100,000 kilometers. It could split a planet into two. Right now, this sword attack that gathered the life and destruction forces of countless worlds slashed down. The soaring sword light crushed large areas of meadow land and countless cities. The sword light was like a bugle horn that signaled the end of the world. As it pressed down inch by inch, the entire world was slowly sliced apart. Right now, more than half of the members of the God Massacre team have been wiped out by the celestial eradication technique martial art projection. The ponytailed young female android was covered in crushed flesh and metal. She seemed to no longer have sufficient energy to continue recovering. Looking at the sword light that came down from the sky and cut across the starry sky, the young female android let out an enraged bellow. She wielded both swords and charged out toward the celestial eradication technique martial art projection once again. Demon. A series of plasma air masses kept on exploding as the two of them exchanged blows, stirring up the land within a range of 1,000 leagues into a mess. I'm going to kill you. A myriad of sword cheese charged out toward the celestial eradication technique martial art projection. Each stream of sword cheese slashed out a portion of space. As the sword cheese came gushing out, all of the space that Fong Xingjian had to dodge to was eliminated. He was struck by the sword cheese head-on with no way to avoid them. However, at the same time as he was struck, a myriad of light pursuit sword intents shot out explosively, clashing with the sword cheese and annihilating them. Fong Xingjian looked at the young female who was still attacking desperately and said calmly, "Is it all right to just watch as your world gets destroyed?" He shrugged, smiled, and said, "If you go and stop him now, I won't stop you." The ponytailed young female android's eyes were filled with killing intent as she asked, "What tricks are you up to now?" The other androids at the side said, "Dilly, don't listen to this demon's bewitchment." Fong Xingjian smiled and retreated abruptly by 100 kilometers. He continued, "Are you guys really not going to stop him? If no one stops that stream of 7 emotions sword chi, it'll slash the entire Morning Star into two." Hearing his words, the other warriors from the God Massacre team hesitated. The ponytailed young female android frowned and said, "You guys leave first. I'll stop him." Seeing that the others still wanted to reject her, she bellowed, "Leave quickly. The Morning Star's safety is the top priority." The others looked at each other hesitantly, but in the end, they slowly retreated. Throughout the entire process, the ponytail girl looked at Fong Xingjian warily. However, she saw that he did not attack at all, as if he was really going to let them go. After everyone left, the ponytail girl took a deep look at Fong Xingjian and said in a cold voice, "Demon, what you did to our world today, I will definitely return it to you 10 times, 100 times." With that, she swung both her swords, and in the blink of an eye, she disappeared several hundred kilometers of space. She retreated as if she had teleported, disappearing from Fong Xingjian's vision. Seeing that the God Massacre team had retreated, Fong Xingjian smiled. He looked at his slightly shattered palm and shook his head. Although martial art projections can be reborn, they aren't able to replenish their chi at any time. Their limits are still a little low. With that, he lowered his head and looked at the ground under his feet. But it's enough. At the next moment, he turned into a phantom image and darted down fiercely with the infiltrating void sword. In the sky, as the defensive force field shattered, Prince plunged down toward the metal ground. As a loud sound rang out, metal fragments soared into the sky, and the entire ground seethed like ocean waves. As the defensive force field shattered, the atmosphere on the Morningstar's surface dissipated rapidly toward the universe's vacuum, bringing forth many strong gales. The entire spaceship's environment deteriorated at a rapid rate. However, right now, as Prince stood on the surface of the spaceship and watched as a large number of metal buildings were turned into fragments and blown into the sky, there was a hint of burning passion in his eyes. Her mind was still filled with the sword attack that Feng Xingjian had sent across the starry sky earlier. Right now, there were no more fighter aircrafts flying toward her position. All of the fighter aircrafts in the entire spaceship were gathering toward the spot where the sword light had landed. The commander of the fighter aircrafts stared at the spot where the sword light had landed. As the sword light landed, a huge hole with a width of over 1,000 kilometers was slashed open on the entire Morningstar. It was as if the entire spaceship had started to split into two halves from the middle. As the sword light pressed down, a series of explosions kept on erupting from the dark crack. One after another, fighter aircrafts rushed over and bombarded the sword light with endless firepower, hoping to stop this attack that could destroy the world. Over 1 billion fighter aircrafts unleashed their firepower at the same time. The destructive prowess that could burn the entire miracle world into a glass ball seemed so powerless at this moment. Faced with the sword attack that was formed from the gathering of countless worlds' life and death forces, their attacks were meaningless. The sword light continued to press down inch by inch, slowly slashing the entire spaceship apart. The God Massacre team also arrived at the spot where the sword light was. Looking at the ground that kept on cracking open and the huge canyon that they could not see the end of, everyone's countenances were extremely grim. "Go down. We must stop him." The ponytailed young lady let out a roar and charged out toward the sword light in the canyon with a determined expression. The other members of the God Massacre team exchanged a glance. Their countenances were grim, and they also jumped down without any hesitation. These over 10 androids with the battle prowess of a Tier 6 Divine level expert moved at rapid speed. In the blink of an eye, they arrived above the sword light. As all sorts of attacks, such as spatial elimination, high and low temperatures, and matter disintegration, landed, the space within a range of 1,000 lis was stirred up into a mess. All the matter in the entire space was disintegrated into the most basic particles, turning into a pot of chemical soup under the high temperature. The combined forces of these over 10 people could turn the entire Earth into hell. However, they were currently using all their powers to stop the sword light from slashing down. When the sword light landed on the other side of the tower, Catherine was already on the verge of going crazy. She unleashed her attacks in exasperation, sending out streams of antimatter cannon rays that completely engulfed Feng Xingjian and the ground. The metal ground that was several hundred meters tall was wiped out, and the ground within a range of several thousand lis sank by several hundred meters. "Feng Xingjian, are you crazy? Do you know what you're doing?" The jewel on Catherine's forehead continued to emit spiritual tremors. As they attacked Feng Xingjian's consciousness, they also transmitted information. However, the Royal Heavenly Great Art martial art projection did not reply to her curses at all. "Fool, you have no idea how much trouble you've gotten yourself into." Seeing that there was no way to determine the victor within a short period of time, Catherine controlled the God Massacre mech and sank into the metal ground. It was as if she had dived into a pool of liquid, sinking rapidly toward the spaceship under her feet. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.